Chapter 590. A friend has come in the blink of an eye. 2 months passed. During these 2 months, the Flame Mercenaries had exponentially expanded and earned a place as one of the strongest mercenary groups in the Blue Wind Kingdom. A group that stood on top of the other leading factions, and even the royal palace itself. Up to this point, only the strongest families and factions had been able to prevent themselves from being subjugated by Jianchun. A large mansion was situated at the very center of a first-class city called Wanzhou City. This mansion had originally belonged to the strongest power within that city, but had now been reclaimed to become the living area of the Flame Mercenaries for the time being. Even the name board at the very front had been swapped for the emblem of the Flame Mercenaries. At this current moment within the magnificent halls of the mansion, Jianchun and the strongest 100 members were all gathered around a table to discuss several important matters. For the moment, the rest of the mercenaries were all stationed outside the city, in a clearing, since they could not all enter the city at the same time. Captain, only 3 out of the 6 strongest families in the Blue Wind Kingdom were willing to join our Flame Mercenaries. The other 3 would rather die than submit. Zhang Tian dutifully reported. He was one of the first to join the Flame Mercenaries, and was also one of the 3 Earth Saint Masters from the Carnage Mercenaries, and had been given the right to speak for the entire group. From his seat at the very front of the table, Jianchun revealed a small grin on his face as he took in the news from Zhang Tian. 3 of them were willing to submit. I see. Not bad. I wasn't expecting as much at first. Which 3 have agreed? Not long after he finished speaking, 2 middle-aged men and an elder come walking over with respectful salutes and greetings. This one is Shi Wanjun, representative for the Daong clan. We of the Daong clan would be happy to join the Flame Mercenaries, and hope that we may follow the honorable captain into the brilliant light. This one is In Situ, representative of the Domineering Heavens sect. We would be happy to join the Flame Mercenaries. This one is Dick Perosi, delegate of the Shuelong clan. We are willing to join your Flame Mercenaries. These 3 men were all Earth Saint Masters at about the 4th or 5th cycle. The parties they represented were among the strongest powers in the Blue Wind Kingdom, and once had a Heaven Saint Master presiding over them. However, those Heaven Saint Masters had been killed in the war with the Jessen Kingdom. Staring at the 3 humble and respectful men, Jianchun nodded his head in satisfaction. I welcome you into the family that is the Flame Mercenaries. From henceforth we are all family. As long as you work with the Flame Mercenaries in mind, then I, Jianchun, pledge to never treat any one of you wrong. I declare that the Daong clan, the Domineering Heavens sect, and the Shuelong clan will change their names to that of the Halls of Daong, Domineering Heaven and Shuelong, and you 3 will still lead your respective hall. Jianchun had no desire to expunge any one of their power upon entry into the Flame Mercenaries. The only thing that would change would be their goals. Their relative power would remain untouched, but any sect or clan would be changed to a hall. 1,000 thanks for Captain's charity. The 3 men clapped their hands together in salute. All 3 of them had been worried that their authority would be stripped away from them the moment they joined the Flame Mercenaries. Sitting on his seat while deep thought, Jianchun said, Zhang Tian, take some people to Lust City and eliminate the Harito clan. A report for the captain. Rumors have it that the Harito clan vacated Lust City a long time ago. According to our same sources, they fled the Blue Wind Kingdom already. A black-robed elder spoke. What? They've already left the kingdom? Jianchun's eyes narrowed for a moment before he waved his hand with a small smile. They act quite fast. If I had known that they would flee earlier, I would have moved to deal with them sooner. Captain, why don't we dispatch a team to chase after them? Zhang Tian asked. Giving it a second to think about, Jianchun replied, No need. I will handle the Harito clan myself, since they're no longer a threat to worry about. Unless their leader is able to become a Heaven Saint Master, they won't be able to do anything in the meanwhile. Even if he becomes a Heaven Saint Master in the next 20 years, our Flame Mercenaries will have grown strong enough to deal with them. Even if I'm not here, a single Heaven Saint Master won't be able to measure up to the strength of the entire Flame Mercenaries. They've decided to run away from the kingdom for now, so we don't even need to bother with them. Then Captain, what shall we do about the 3 factions that chose death over submission? An elder asked from the side. Jianchen leaned back in his chair while his fingers kneaded. He realized that leading the flame mercenaries was becoming more and more of a headache. It was no longer as easy as before where he could act as he pleased. Back then he was the only member, and didn't require such heavy consideration. Everyone, why don't you inform me of your ideas? Jianchen suggested. Captain, since the flame mercenaries have become so strong, and those 3 factions refuse to submit, we shouldn't let things lie there. We should eliminate them all. Let them serve as an example to the world of our strength. Captain, we should avoid that at all costs. The remaining 3 factions still have 2 Heaven Saint Masters within their reach, and a considerable amount of Earth Saint Masters. If those 3 join hands, then they will become an enemy that will deal a considerable amount of harm to us. Should we fight them, then we would anger even the kingdom itself. If they mobilize the entire army, then our flame mercenaries would suffer even more. Captain, those 3 factions are not to be belittled. We have no conflict with them, and even if they would rather die than submit, it is not worth going to war with them only to suffer a disastrous result. The ends do not make up for the means. Everyone came to different conclusions about how to handle the situation. On one hand, some wanted to eliminate the group. On the other hand, some wanted to forgive and let them be. From where she stood by the side, Bai Lian hesitated to speak for a brief second. Finally she gave her input. Brother, there is no conflict between us and the 3 factions. We don't have any real need to subjugate them, and we should forget about them for now since they're willing to die rather than to submit. With 2 Heaven Saint Masters, they cause a lot of damage if they join together since our flame mercenaries have no other Heaven Saint Master besides you, brother. Bai Lian and I share the same opinion. Yu agreed with her. Everyone grew quiet when the 2 of them spoke. They all knew that these 2 women were both very close to the captain, and thus they were not willing to say anything else. Jianchen wasted no time to agree with the 2 of them. If that is so, we'll forget about this matter for now. Well, today's meeting shall end here then. You may all leave, and make the preparations for whatever necessities you need. In 3 days we leave the Blue Wind Kingdom. Yes, Captain. Everyone agreed before leaving the halls. After the meeting was adjourned, Jianchen returned to his own room. He lay down on the bed and closed his eyes. His fingers gently tapped against his temples. Now that the flame mercenaries had exploded in scale, it took even longer to consider and think everything through, causing Jianchen some fatigue. Suddenly, the doors opened to reveal Yu wearing a pink long skirt as she walked into the room. When she saw Jianchen rubbing his temples, she revealed a concerned look on her face. Jianchen. She softly continued. Managing the flame mercenaries is a tiresome task, isn't it? Yes, it really is quite tiresome. Now that the flame mercenaries have grown, there is far too much to consider, and far too many factors to think about. It is only now that I realize how tremendous a task it is to manage such an enormous group. Aside from having an equally tremendous amount of power, one must not neglect being able to control and manage everything. Jianchen replied while massaging his headache. Choosing to sit on a nearby chair, Yu said, You could delegate these small affairs to someone else you know. There aren't many that I could trust. Aside from the group we travel with, there are no other capable people. Ming Dong is the vice captain, but I know his nature. He isn't cut out for something like this. Dugafeng does not have the power, and Tai Ta is further away from such a position. The only ones left would be you and Bai Lian. Jianchen sighed. Then his eyes flew open as he looked to Yu. Yu, I know that you've been an intelligent person since childhood, and spent years learning in Kargath Academy, while growing up in the palace. If I have you and Bai Lian govern the flame mercenaries, do you believe that you would be able to do the group well? Yu was pleasantly surprised to hear the words that had come out of Jianchen's mouth. What? Jianchen, do you really think Bai Lian and I should be governing the flame mercenaries? Sitting up, Jianchen faced her with an earnest expression. I do. If you have the ability to govern, then I would be willing to allow you to do so in my place. That would be great, Jianchen. You may rest assured, Bai Lian and I won't let you down. Yu Yu excitedly replied. Just then, Ming Dong walked into the room. When he saw the happy Yu Yu by his side, Ming Dong stared suspiciously at Jian Shen. Brother, you've a friend here to see you. Who? Jian Shen asked. You'll know when you come. Ming Dong smiled mischievously. Suspicious of his actions, Jian Shen followed Ming Dong out of the room and into the open courtyards of the mansion with Yu Yu following him from behind. Soon enough, Jian Shen arrived at the gates to the building, but when he saw just who this familiar person Ming Dong had referred to, the expression on his face solidified into one of astonishment. The friend in question was Huang Wan. Chapter 591. Battle of Two Women. Stunned, Jian Shen stared at Huang Wan. She was standing by the gates, and then his eyes swung to Yu Yu standing right next to him. He felt the complaints inside his head grow so huge that they would take off his head. Not once did he ever think that Huang Wan would take the initiative to find him, especially when his fiancée was right next to him. One woman was someone he had some feelings for, and once had a very close relationship with. The other woman was his fiancée, that was known throughout the Jessin kingdom. Jian Shen didn't even know just how to treat this matter, since this was the first time these two women had come into contact. Ming Dong clearly understood just what sort of trouble Jian Shen was in, but he had no intentions of helping him at all. Instead, he chuckled. Brother, I have some things to take care of, so I'll be leaving first. Ming Dong hadn't really meant what he said. He turned around just a few steps away to observe Jian Shen, Yu Yu, and Huang Wan with a smile on his face, as if he was taking pleasure in the crisis befalling Jian Shen. Forcing a smile, Jian Shen asked Huang Wan, What brings you here? Today, Huang Wan was wearing a white-colored robe that accentuated her picture-perfect figure that only the devil could offer. Her figure possessed an allure that could seize the hearts of anyone with just a single motion. Her clothes were on point with how they had been tied. Not a single part of her robes was messed up. Compared to the clothing she had worn as the golden daughter of her clan, she looked like a heroic woman ready for travel. The icy cold demeanor on Huang Wan's face had instantly softened the moment her eyes fell upon Jian Shen. Smiling, she said, Are you not going to welcome me in? Her voice leaked a feeling of close friendship. The forced smile was still on his face when Jian Shen addressed Huang Wan. Of course I will welcome you in. Please come in and we can have a chat. Giving a sweet smile to Jian Shen, she tossed down the reins in her hand and followed him in. The guards at the gates were members of the Flame Mercenaries, so they immediately rushed in to take the mount away. Stopping in front of Jian Shen, she eyed his handsome face with a tender-hearted smile. She was just about to say something when all of a sudden, she realized that there was another beautiful woman standing right next to Jian Shen. Eyeing her with some confusion, she asked, Jian Shen, who's this? Hello, I am Yu Yu. Yu Yu answered first. There was a smile on her face, but in her heart, there was a sour feeling. The feelings Huang Wan had for Jian Shen were obvious to see. Hence, she was able to infer that the connection between the two was close. Yu Yu, could you be the Grand Princess to the Jessin Kingdom? Huang Wan asked her in shock. She nodded in response. Correct, that is I. Might I ask who you are? The light in Huang Wan's eyes changed when she regarded Yu Yu now. There was a darker tint of light that seemed to contain some jealousy just barely hidden in them. I am Huang Wan, a member of the Huang family. Ah, Miss Huang Wan, which kingdom are you from? I have heard of the Huang family before, but which clan it is something I know not. Yu Yu smiled softly. I'm afraid to disappoint the princess, but my Huang family is affiliated with no kingdom. We live in the mountains and rarely encounter the surrounding kingdoms or any other family that might share our surname. Huang Wan replied. Sensing the hidden steel to their tones, Jian Shen felt his headache grow bigger and bigger. Why don't we walk inside first and continue our talks there? He pressed. Jian Shen, Yu Yu, and Huang Wan were all seated around a circular table in a splendid and magnificently decorated room. Huang Wan was excited to see Jian Shen and talked to him non-stop about the Flame Mercenaries with great curiosity. Whenever she asked another question, Jian Shen answered truthfully without leaving any mystery behind. Huang Wan's eyes brightened at this moment, as if she had remembered something. Looking to Jian Shen, she said, Jian Shen, I've something to tell you. I've become the student to the patriarch of the Huanggu clan. They're even willing to teach me their scriptures of the aqua sunflower, a saint-tier cultivation method. What? A saint-tier cultivation method? Jianchun was astounded. Although cultivation methods weren't as wanted as a battle skill, a saint-tier one was priceless despite that. Extremely rare and sparse, only the most isolated of hermits would have these cultivation methods. It is a cultivation method for those with the water affinity, something I coincidentally possess. Because of this, I learned it and cultivated the cultivation method for a small moment. In just 2 months, I was able to bring up my power so fast that I went from a first cycle Earth Saint Master to a second cycle Earth Saint Master. It won't be long until I become a third cycle Earth Saint Master. And with this rate of progress, becoming a Heaven Saint Master won't even take too many years. Huang Wan's face was filled with unrestrained excitement. Yu felt shock grip her heart right by Jianchun's side. She had not thought that this wildly dressed Huang Wan would be an Earth Saint Master despite the close similarity in age to her own. Not only that, she too did not expect to hear that she was learning a saint-tier cultivation method, something that was only mentioned in legends. Not too long later, Yu managed to restrain her emotions and maintain her calm demeanor. From what she heard, this Huang Wan was definitely someone high in status, and was possibly one of those golden daughters belonging to a tremendous family. Not only was her talent at cultivation higher than her own, Huang Wan was already an Earth Saint Master at her age while Yu wasn't. Lastly, Huang Wan had managed to find a teacher that imparted a saint-tier cultivation method onto her. This meant that she was practically superior in every single aspect. And even with Yu's status of a princess, she paled in comparison to Huang Wan. Jianchun noted the change in Yu's demeanor with some concern. He immediately broke off the conversation and called for someone to prepare Huang Wan in room. He then dismissed everyone. Even after leaving the room, Yu felt extremely depressed. Walking by herself to her own room, she sat on top of the bed and stared despondently at the wall across from her. The doors to her room slowly opened to reveal Jianchun gently making his way into the room. Jianchun felt his heart clench when he saw how Yu was faring. Closing the doors behind him, Jianchun walked over to Yu and sat down beside her. Studying her face with great concern, Jianchun was about to say something, but then he realized he had no idea just what words he could possibly use to comfort her. He sighed. Jianchun was not someone who understood how to speak with flowery speech, and in a situation like this, he was utterly powerless. There was a gleam to her eyes when Yu turned to look at Jianchun with a miserable expression, but it was because of the reflection of the light on the layer of water that was welling up in her eyes. At last, 2 teardrops formed just enough to flow down her beautiful face before they splashed on the ground. Jianchun panicked at the sight of her teardrops, but before he could speak, Yu beat him to the punch. Jianchun, tell me, were your words before about you having no time for women a lie? You were unwilling to wed me before. Was it because there was already another woman in your heart? A woman who is far superior than I am? She was heartbroken, and her voice was threatening to break into a sob. In all honesty, her heart felt nothing but love for Jianchun, and that's why she found it heartbreaking to be in such a situation. When Huang Wan showed up today, the deep feelings she felt for Jianchun were completely obvious, visible even to the naked eye. Combined with the fact that she was superior in every way to Yu, the princess felt this other woman's presence as a tremendous threat that could steal away the man she loved. Pulling at Yu's hands, Jianchun clutched them with great intimacy as he softly said, Yu, it isn't what you think it is. The reason why I wasn't in a hurry to wed you was because I wasn't ready to settle down. I have not yet resolved the problems that weigh on my shoulders, and if I don't resolve them before I start a family, then it will only bring everyone harm. I won't hear this. I don't want to hear these lies. Just how many times have you said these words? Yu began to cry. At a loss for words, Jianchun looked at Yu. From the very start of their relationship, Yu had given him the feeling of someone that was always calm. But this was the very first time he had ever seen Yu cry her heart out. This was something he felt a great deal of pain over. He sighed once more. He had to be honest with Yu, else he would only hurt her more. Yu, although it may seem as if I am invincible on the surface as a heaven saint master and an imperial protector of one of the 8 great powers on the continent, my life is not as relaxed as you think it might be. I have many enemies that pose a threat to me still. Jianchen suddenly spoke before segueing into the hidden story of his life to her. Yu paused temporarily in her tears to fixate her eyes on him. In my years roaming the Tianyuan continent, I offended many families, and although some of them were killed off, there are still plenty of hidden factions that I have no way of fighting against. Among those families are the Shi family and the Jetta clan. These 2 factions are hermit clans on the continent, with a vast amount of strength, due to the fact that they have saint rulers ruling over them. Only death would absolve the grudges between those factions and me. If I am alive, they will not rest, and if they are not dead, I will never be safe. It is likely that those 2 clans have been searching for me ever since. And even if there is a long distance between the 2 of us, it is only a matter of time before they arrive here. The very moment they find out my identity, being the imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom, won't be nearly enough to help me. Thus, I must improve my strength as much as I can. If I do not, then when the saint rulers come for me, I will die a pauper's death along with the family I have. Aside from those 2, there is still the sect of Dragon and Tiger, from the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. They are a powerful sect to contend with, and their patriarch is a saint ruler that heavily desires a treasure of mine. Me being an imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom has beaten them back temporarily, but they will not stop at that. It remains to be seen just what sort of tricks the saint ruler might come up with to harm me. Staring solemnly at Yu, he continued, Yu, do you understand the overwhelming pressure that weighs upon my shoulders now? The enemies I've made are people of the saint ruler realm. As I am now, I stand no chance against them. Even escape is an impossibility. With how the odds are stacked, I have no idea just how much time I have left to live. Chapter 592. Ancestor of the Huanggu clan. In order to cure the wound in Yu's heart, Jianchen had no other choice but to explain everything he had hidden from the world. Even his parents had never heard this information. Jianchen knew that if he hiding his secrets like this would only serve to confirm the worries in Yu's heart, dealing another blow to it. That was something Jianchen wanted to avoid. Yu had completely stopped her tears as she listened to Jianchen speak. The 2 glistening eyes on her beautiful face stared at Jianchen in silence. She finally understood, this very moment, the tremendous amount of pressure Jianchen had always talked about, and just what great dangers were waiting ahead of him. A saint ruler was an unfathomable entity in the eyes of Yu. They were people that belonged to the legends of old. Only a few people on the continent were able to come face to face with them. Jianchen, on the other hand, had managed to not only make enemies with a single saint ruler, but possibly 2 or even 3 of them. The fear Yu felt in her heart was outweighed by the deep worries she had for Jianchen. He clenched his hands tightly over Yu's. It was a first for him to really realize just how smooth and tender her jade-like palms felt to the touch. The sensation was very soft indeed, but Jianchen didn't pay too much attention to the details. Instead, he stared back at Yu with a stern expression. Yu, I have not told even my parents of this, so I hope you will safeguard these secrets of mine. Do not let my mother know at all costs. A saint ruler is far too strong for the Changyang clan to weather as it stands now. I don't want the clan to worry for me. Dazed, Yu continued to stare at Jianchen. The grief and sorrow she had felt before had completely disappeared, but now, worry and concern had replaced it. I am sorry, Jianchen. I didn't know about just how large this scale was. Yu lamented. Giving a small smile, Jianchen shook his head. Yu, it is fine as long as you understand. The hatred between those 2 families and me is irreconcilable. Without that matter resolved, I really do not wish to waste time trying to start a family of my own. Yu was placated for now. She was now feeling better than when she had first entered the room, allowing Jianchen to return to his own room in peace. However, as soon as Jianchen walked into his drawing room, his entire figure grew rigid, and a sharp light glinted in his eyes, as if it was reflecting the light of a sword being drawn. Seated in the room was a blue-robed elder with his back facing Jianchen. Seated by the table, he drank a single cup of tea with only his own company to converse with. This man had long, black hair that went down his back without a messy spot to be seen. At a glance, he appeared to be just a regular person with no outstanding traits. However, this seemingly unimportant person made Jianchen stare at him seriously, as if prepared to take action at any moment against an enemy. This person was practically undetectable to even Jianchen, and if it were not for his own eyes seeing the man, Jianchen would have overlooked the man entirely. The only ones capable of managing such a feat were hermits of the Saint Ruler level. Having a Saint Ruler suddenly appear in his very own room was something that made Jianchen nervous. "Who are you?" Jianchen questioned as he shifted his right hand behind his back to clench the jade piece in his hand. Since he could not fight against a Saint Ruler, then his only option was to ask for the assistance of the Huang Patriarch. "Haha, little brother, do not be nervous. This old man came for an impromptu visit. If I disturbed you, then please forgive me." An elderly voice came from the mouth of the blue-robed man. Yet, he remained seated at the table with his back still facing Jianchen. Sensing no hostile aura around the man, Jianchen eased up slightly while staring at the back of the man. "Senior, who might you be?" "If you wish to know even that, then I'll tell you this. That girl Huang Wan has already told you about her having a teacher." "That is me, I am her teacher," the man replied. Jianchen was astonished, and the look in his eyes reflected that astonishment. "Could you be the patriarch of the Huanggu clan?" "Correct, that is I." With his identity confirmed, Jianchen let out a mental sigh of relief. Although a Saint Ruler was undoubtedly a tremendous source of pressure to him, at least this one was no enemy to him. "Little brother, come sit and let us talk," the man suggested, easing back into the calm and easygoing nature of his. Jianchen strode to the seat on the other side of the man and sat down. Straight away, Jianchen could see the man's face. It was a very ordinary-looking face that was filled with wrinkles due to age. The only difference was that a single blue seal sat in the middle of his forehead, but it was hard to make out the picture in full clarity because of the wrinkles. The elder leveled a meaningful glance at Jianchen. "Little brother, should I be calling you the imperial protector of the Qin Huang kingdom, or the fourth master of the Changyang clan? Or perhaps Jianchen?" "Senior, please just call me Jianchen." He smiled. The old man nodded his head just slightly. "Then I shall do so. Jianchen, I am not one that enjoys beating around the bush, so I shall get to the point." He paused for a brief moment to take in a breath of air. "Jianchen, I came here specifically because of Huang Wan, so the matter we will be discussing will relate to Huang Wan herself." Jianchen could feel his heart sink. Could this be about the betrothment between your Huanggu clan and the Huang family? Shaking his head, the elder replied, "That matter has already been settled and dealt with. I won't even bother to try and harangue the matter any longer. Instead, I came here today to talk about her future." "Senior, what might you mean by that?" Jianchen asked, mystified at what the elderly figure was getting at. Humming, the elder thought for a moment, trying to find the best way to describe his thoughts. "Huang Wan has a very particular body that comes once 1,000 years on the continent. If she were to train with the water affinity cultivation method, her growth would be exponential. For that reason, I bequeathed the Saint Tier cultivation method to her, so that she could learn twice the amount for half the effort. Becoming a Saint Ruler wouldn't be difficult for her at all. But there is a single taboo she must not commit. Until she becomes a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master, she must remain pure at all costs. Otherwise, the effects she will receive will be irrevocably disastrous for her." The elder spoke with an increasingly grim voice. Jianchen had been listening on with the utmost seriousness, but when he heard what the patriarch said, he could not help but blush a little. Giving an embarrassed smile, he said, "Senior, you may rest assured. The relationship between Huang Wan and I is nowhere near such a situation." "That is good then." The man nodded his head in satisfaction. "Jianchen, you should know that for the sake of Huang Wan's future, you must uphold her purity." "This junior understands." Jianchen scratched his nose in embarrassment. He couldn't help but ask himself, was he really a person that wanted nothing but lust? With that said and done, the patriarch stood up from his stool. This old man has said all that he wanted to say. Until we meet again then. The next moment, the patriarch disappeared from the room without a trace. Looking left and then right, Jianshun could see that the windows and doors to the room were still tightly shut. There was virtually no way to escape from this sealed space, and no crack or crevice to be seen. With those factors to be considered, Jianshun had to truly wonder how the patriarch had left. A saint ruler is truly powerful. The powers they possess are far beyond what I can imagine. Jianshun muttered with a twinge of jealousy. So Huang Wuan's talent stems from her body itself. No wonder she was able to become an Earth Saint Master at such a young age, several kilometers away. The patriarch of the Huanggu clan materialized out of thin air, as if he had been a mirage, no longer teleporting here and there. The elder chose to instead fly the rest of the way at incredible speed. Now that I've told him that, he will most likely not see Huang Wuan as a wife for now, leaving her body completely intact. Though, even if he wishes to do something unbecoming to her, the restriction I've placed on her will not let him get away. The elder smiled darkly, as if he was plotting something. In the blink of an eye, a year passed. In that year, the flame mercenaries had grown spectacularly, and without ever stopping. The stronger factions of the several surrounding kingdoms had been completely annexed, including the factions from the Qiangan Kingdom, the Qianlong Kingdom, the Andreas Kingdom, the Pingyang Kingdom, and even some of the other kingdoms that had once nursed a grudge with the Jessan Kingdom. This made the flame mercenaries into a hegemon to be feared. Their members had exploded to over 100,000, with over 500 Earth Saint Masters. Even several Heaven Saint Masters had been coerced into it, making the comparison to the past a very shocking one. The Flame Mercenaries' explosive growth made them a household name that everyone knew about. Practically every mercenary or mercenary group would talk about the Flame Mercenaries with either eyes of envy or admiration. The Flame Mercenaries had exploded in power so fast that the scale today could practically be considered a miracle made in real life. Within a desolate piece of land, a group of people riding on mounts could be seen resting. Buildings could be seen all around them, and not too far away, several hundred fumes of fire spiraled into the air. Mercenaries sat around each of the fires in groups of 3s or 4s, as they talked to one another over a piece of magical beast meat. Hoisted overhead was an emblem of a ball of fire. This was the emblem of the Flame Mercenaries. Seated at the very center of all the banners and tents was Jianshun, and the others who were currently discussing matters. Jianshun, as of today, the Flame Mercenaries have reached a very definite scale of over 100,000 members. The time is ripe for us to create a city of our own. Dugafeng spoke. Chapter 593. A vein of tungsten alloy. Jianshun had to think about Dugafeng's proposal for a brief moment. He knew that there were plenty of mercenary groups that managed to construct their own cities after gaining enough power. It was only when a mercenary group founded their own city that they had the right to say they were someone important on the Tianyuan continent. Mercenary groups that owned a city were extremely strong, and the Flame Mercenaries paled in comparison to the majority of mercenary groups in power. Although they had well over 100,000 members, the amount of people that were strong enough to assume responsibility over any single jurisdiction were far too few. Aside from Jianshun, there were only 3 other Heaven Saint Masters. If they were to try to construct a city like this, it would be insanely difficult to maintain their power. They would end up as the losers if their city was besieged. Not only was it common for kingdoms to fight with another for power, mercenaries would oftentimes move into cities and attempt to seize power almost as often. With those factors in mind, Jianshun finally made up his mind and said, "Our Flame Mercenaries might be strong in our area, but our strength is still limited to just this small area. We are not quite yet strong enough to attempt to build a city, so we should hold off for now." I agree. Our group, the Flame Mercenaries, is quite strong, but there is still a huge threat of internal danger. Therefore, we should refocus our efforts in trying to resolve the matters with all of the members. We must ensure that the relationship between each and every mercenary is as tight as a twine of rope. Otherwise, the flame mercenaries that we built up with will crumble at the base and collapse sooner or later. Yu added her insight. Is that so? Then why don't we spend the next period of time listening to you, when dealing with internal matters? Yu Bai Lian, I'll leave this to you to handle. If there is anything you need from me, go ahead and ask. Jianshan replied. In this short moment of time, the flame mercenaries had been left up to Yu and Bai Lian to administrate. After being tested for an entire year, Jianshan had seen more than enough to be convinced that the two of them were talented in this aspect. Bai Lian's cultivation talent was not unique. She hadn't even managed to form her saint weapon yet, but her keen wit and intelligence was unbelievably sharp. It was better honed than Yu's intelligence in several aspects. It was almost as if she was born to be a superior administrator. A report for the captain. We've received a letter to give to you. At that moment, a single voice called out from outside. Hand it over. Yes. The flaps of the tent blew open as the white-robed Ha-and-I came walking in. In his hand was a snow-white lightning bird. Taking the lightning bird from Ha-and-I into his own hands, he untied the letter around its leg. He then unfurled it to read. Important. Return to Chongyang Manor. Only a meager few words had been scrawled on the letter, causing Jianshan's expression to become very grim. Taking note of the sudden change in expression, everyone nervously tensed up. It was Yu that finally asked out of concern. Jianshan, what happened? Jianshan studied the letter once more to verify that it wasn't a fake message. Then, slowly tearing it into several pieces, he explained. A letter came from back home telling me to return to the Chongyang clan. We'll have the mercenaries stay here for now and wait for my return. If something urgent happens, notify me by the twin jade stones. Bidding farewell to Yu and the others, Jianshan went and found the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters to give them their instructions. Afterward, he flew with great speed through the air back to Chongyang Manor. By the time he arrived, it was already nightfall. As he began to descend to the ground, the Chang Wuji immediately made himself known. He was able to pinpoint him the moment he touched solid ground. Fourth Master, you've returned rather quickly, I see. Chang Wuji smiled. Jianshan let out a secret sigh of relief when he saw the relaxed face of Chang Wuji. From the very start of his rush back home, he had been worried that something had happened to the family. Chang Wuji, what has happened for you to ask me to come home at once? Jianshan asked. I do not know the details, but men from the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom came with a very important message to tell you. They said it was a matter that couldn't be delayed. Your father sent a message for you to return right away. The elder explained the best he could. Heavenly Eagle Kingdom? Did that kingdom not cease to exist? Jianshan tilted his head in confusion. Unable to stop himself from chuckling, Chang Wuji smiled at Jianshan. Perhaps I should have phrased it differently. The 7 heads of the territories that once belonged to the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom came here with an important message for you. Fourth Master, they are currently in the discussion hall. We should head on over. Shortly after that, Jianshan and Chang Wuji entered the manor and headed straight for the main halls. On the way, plenty of guards saluted him while the maids and servants bowed down with the most respect they could muster. It did not take long for Jianshan to enter the halls themselves. He noticed that plenty of people were already gathered here. Most noticeable was his father and mother, the other important elders of the Chongyang clan, and a sturdy-looking middle-aged man who was currently in deep discussion with someone else. The arrival of Jianshan was apparent to everyone. They lined up shoulder to shoulder and bowed to cordially greet Jianshan. At this moment, everyone in the halls was filled with respect for him. The middle-aged man that had been discussing stuff with everyone else came forward to bow and greet Jianshan personally. Captain of the Blood Moon Mercenaries Tynes pays his respects to the Imperial Protector. After the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom dissolved, it had been split into 7 partitions. The Blood Moon Mercenaries had subsequently become the overseers of one of those 7 partitions. Regaling the man, Jianshan said, Tynes, what important matter was it that you needed to inform me of? What can you tell me about it? Looking around the hall, Tynes hesitated to speak. Imperial Protector, this is a matter of utmost secrecy, so. Understanding his intentions, Jianshan replied, If that is so, then we shall speak in my own residence. Yes, Imperial Protector. Looking to his father, Changyang-ba, and his mother, Bai Yuntian, Jianshan said, Father, Mother, your son has matters to take care of. I will be leaving first. Xiang'er, Captain Tynes has trekked countless of kilometers to run to the Changyang clan. If it is a serious issue, you needn't worry about your parents. Go and take care of what you need to do. Changyang-ba laughed. Xiang'er, time is of the essence, go and do what you must. Bai Yuntian softly replied. A son that was as outstanding yet filial, as Jianshan was a son that she felt an exorbitant amount of pride in. Exchanging several more words of greeting to the other members in the hall, Jianshan led Tynes back to his own building. Tynes, what important matter do you have to tell me? Has the sect of Dragon and Tiger decided to mobilize against you? Jianshan inquired with a solemn expression. Tynes shook his head and looked carefully around the place. Then, speaking into Jianshan's ear, he whispered, Imperial Protector, we have discovered a tremendous deposit of tungsten alloy. What? A tremendous deposit of tungsten alloy? A spark glinted in Jianshan's eyes as he murmured to himself. Tungsten alloys were extremely sparse on the continent, and worth several times their weight in purple coins. A single kilogram was already worth 10 kilograms worth of purple coins. Yes, Imperial Protector. Our Blood Moon mercenaries came across this vein in one of the mountains by pure accident. After further investigations, we've found an even larger vein. Based off a shallow investigation, we concluded that the purity of the ore is at least 85%. Tynes' voice quavered. Jianshan felt a gasp escape his lips, and his heart began to beat even faster. A purity rate of 85% meant that out of 100 ores, 85 of them could be smelted into tungsten alloy. How many people know about this place? Jianshan suddenly asked. I've killed off all those that knew this knowledge outside my group, meaning there's only 50 or so people that do. They are all confidences of mine, and I am sure that they will safeguard the secret of this vein as strictly as I. Tynes replied seriously. A sigh of relief escaped Jianshan's mind. A vein of tungsten alloy was practically an immeasurable source of wealth, since a single kilogram of tungsten alloy was worth 10 times its weight in purple coins. If news of this got out, then there would definitely be bloodshed over it. Imperial Protector, this vein of tungsten alloy is extremely precious and tempting for any faction to give up. If news of this were to leak out, then we would have no power to protect it. Imperial Protector, how do you propose we handle this situation? Should we have the Qinhuang Kingdom oversee it? After a careful moment of consideration, Jianshan replied, If news of the vein has not been leaked out, then let it remain a secret in the meanwhile. Tynes, hurry back and see over it yourself for now. Have the other 7 factions join with you to protect it in secret and extract it in secret. Remember, the less people that know about this, the better. News of this cannot be divulged at any costs. I'll figure out what to do after. Yes, Imperial Protector. Tynes bowed and cupped his hands in salute. There's no time to waste, hurry back over. Chapter 594. Hurrying off to the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom, Tynes left for the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom straight away. With how precious the tungsten alloy was, he couldn't possibly dare try and be negligent over a plethora of wealth like that. There were no Heaven Saint Masters safeguarding it, so Jianshan felt some discomfort at this matter. He was afraid that the news would be leaked. Pacing around the middle of his room with his hands clasped behind his back, Jianshan's mind raced with ideas about how to deal with the tungsten alloy vein. Unknowingly, the small tiger cub had leaped onto his shoulder and stared at him. Its originally bright eyes had already grown dim, as if it was growing listless. It appears I must bring the flame mercenaries over to the territory of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom, Jianshan concluded. After thinking to himself for another hour, Jianshan left his room to call his mother for a meal before leaving the Changyang clan. All sorts of dishes were placed in a beautiful arrangement on top of the table as Jianshan, Changyang-ba, Bai Yuntian, and the other 3 wives of his father sat together and talked. The fact that Jianshan was the captain of the flame mercenaries had already been revealed to his aunts, But it was still a very puzzling thing to think about how he was also the imperial protector of both the Qin Huang and Jessen kingdom. After a brief interrogation by his aunts, Jianshen explained everything without losing his temper. There were no secrets in regards to the flame mercenaries to his mother after all. Xiang'er, you've done the right thing. If Kendall saved you, then you must fulfill the promise you gave for it to be a fair trade. Changyangba approved. Xiang'er, in your times of travel outside, have you come across any news of your sister? Bai Yuntian suddenly blurted out. Jianshen could only shake his head with regret. He sighed. Auntie, your child has searched without end, but nothing of importance has come up. Yu Fengyan's face became more sorrowful at his words. Wretched girl. Who knows what faraway place she has run off to? Why hasn't she even sent a letter back home? Even now, I have not one letter from her, and not even a clue on where my Mingyue has gone. What if she? Halfway through her words, Yu Fengyan could no longer stop herself from descending into a fit of sobs. Her own daughter had left the clan one day without warning or trace, causing her to feel extremely anxious and scared for the well-being of her daughter. The table grew quiet after that. Each person seated there had a grim look on their face. Every person at this table besides Jianshen were either aunts or a parent to Changyang Mingyue, and had seen her grow since birth. So her disappearance had been extremely worrisome to them all. Jianshen had disappeared once, but he had been of a different situation and had came back. Second aunt, please be at peace. Second sister has always been a lucky person. She won't come across any trouble. Look at me. I left the Jessen kingdom for several years by myself without anything harmful coming my way. Jianshen consoled her, but to no avail. Yu Fengyan and the others simply did not think that Changyang Mingyue had the same capabilities as Jianshen. A single woman traveling the continent by herself was a feat that was several times more dangerous than for a male. All sorts of unsavory mercenaries and bandits roamed the continent. It would not be uncommon for them to act upon their lust for women. Our daughter has grown up with a rebellious nature. We are to blame for that. If we did not try to force her into an arranged marriage, she would not have left home. Changyangba sighed bitterly with regret. Father, second aunt, please rest assured. I will definitely have my men scour the continent to find second sister. Jianshen resolutely pledged. When he was young, Changyang Mingyue had been very caring to him, and he had left the Changyang manor with a very favorable impression of her. The disappearance of Changyang Mingyue had left him feeling very melancholic. Forget it. There's no point in talking about this matter for now. We've gone over it more than enough with nothing to show for our efforts. Changyangba sighed before turning to Jianshen. Xiang'er, your father still has something that I hope you'll agree to. You and your third aunt Ling Long have harbored some ill will with one another, that I know. Your third aunt has a small level of tolerance for matters like these due to experiences she has had in the past. Her making life difficult for you was a result of these experiences, but even now, she and your third brother have felt remorse for their actions. They have not been eating with the rest of the family because of their guilt. So, your father wishes that you will understand and forgive your third aunt. Changyangba spoke. There was a slight pleading tone to his words, a sound that was exceedingly rare, especially to a child as the head of a family. Jianshen was more than willing to agree to his father's request. He did not feel completely disgusted by the actions of his third aunt. They were by rights family, and Jianshen was disinclined to ruin a perfectly warm and receiving household with an opinion he didn't hold. The fact that he was willing to let bygones be bygones pleased Jianshen's father to no end. Afterward, Jianshen took out a small portion of the 100-grass wine given to him by the Ape King. Pouring the cups evenly, he distributed them all to the people around the table. As soon as each person took a sip, they could feel their inner strength explode with newfound power. Just 3 months ago, Changyangba had managed to become a second cycle Earth Saint Master. He now stepped into the third cycle with the assistance of the wine. Bai Yu Shuang and Ling Long both felt themselves jumping to the advanced Saint Master level, and even Bai Yuntian, who had never materialized her saint weapon, felt the benefits come flowing in her. She had been a third-class Radiant Saint Master before, But a single sip was more than enough to eclipse all of her hard work before to propel her into the 4th class. Chang Wuji had been invited to take a sip as well. For a heaven saint master like him, a sip of the 100-grass wine was only enough to increase his inner saint force by a small increment. The small increase had not been enough to reach a breakthrough like Kafir, the headmaster of Kargath Academy, had. With the wine drunk and the food eaten, Jianchen followed his parents back to visit his eldest brother, Chang Yanghu. Chang Yanghu was confined to the bed without even the most basic of motor abilities, since he had lost his limbs. He couldn't eat or change his clothes without help. A life that was robbed of any freedom of movement was a life that words could hardly begin to describe the cruelty of. The sight of his own older brother in such a wretched state caused Jianchen's heart to ache. He wanted nothing more than to find a way to become a 7th-class Radiant Saint Master, so he could find some sort method to restore the amputated limbs of Chang Yanghu. On the morning of the 2nd day, Jianchen visited Lore City to find Sands and Kendall's wife. The mother and son had been able to open a rather big inn on one of the more flourishing streets because of the staunch support of the Changyang clan. Business was booming and the patrons flowed in and out like an endless stream of water. With the name of the Changyang clan waved over them, their inn had soon enough become one of the safest inns in the city. No incidents ever took place within their building, meaning that mercenaries and merchants alike could gather here in peace. Farewells were given to the two before Jianchen flew out of Lore City. He was back in the air headed toward the desolate lands where the flame mercenaries were. Once there, Jianchen called for an impromptu meeting with the men. Jianchen, what is the matter for you to rush us like this? As soon as they were gathered within the tent, Ming Dong immediately found his voice to speak up. Seated at his own chair up front, Jianchen looked at the group with people with a grim expression. Pass on my orders. We will pack up camp and head straight for the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom without rest. The entire group was stunned by this order. And it was Yu who asked a question first. Even through the night? Jianchen, what is the matter? Yes, even through the night. Jianchen nodded his head. Go and spread the news to everyone. I will be leaving first. Jianchen, why has the situation become all frantic-like? Has some sort of accident come up or something? Ming Dong cried out. Allow me to keep this a secret for now. I'll tell you about it when we arrive at our destination. Disperse and make the preparations. I'll be leaving first. As soon as he finished speaking, Jianchen exited the tent and flew off toward the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom with haste. 2 days later, Jianchen arrived within the territory of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. Hurrying to recall a mental map of the 7 partitioned territories, Jianchen then flew off to the Blood Moon Mercenaries' land. As the dominating power in one of the 7 areas, the location of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was found relatively quickly once Jianchen asked around. Jianchen had made the rest of the trip in no time at all. The headquarters of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was situated within a revised castle. It did not hide the flying figure of Jianchen from anyone's sight. With the fact that Jianchen had not bothered to make his traveling discreet, the captain of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was quickly notified of his arrival. He swiftly moved to welcome him. 1,000 welcomes for the Imperial Protector. What is the current situation? Has news of the tungsten alloy remained a secret? Jianchen whispered. Here is my report. Everything has been taken care of, and the secret has remained a secret. Aside from a few reliable brothers-in-arms, not a single outsider knows of it. Even the men of the other 6 factions remain unaware of this secret. Tyne spoke. Nodding his head in satisfaction, Jianchen replied, Good, you've done well. For your services today, I will reward you nicely in time. For the honor of the Qinhuang Kingdom and the Imperial Protector, it is the honor of mine to serve. Tyne solemnly replied. Jianchen laughed. Well, where is the location of the mine? Take me there. Yes. Chapter 595. Return to Mercenary City. 1. The distance between the vein of tungsten alloy and the Blood Moon Mercenaries had not been too far apart at about 50 kilometers behind the castle. This location, however, had been surrounded by another 100 kilometers of forests that was vile in both environment and the wildlife alike. Poisonous creatures, swamps, and dangerous beasts all cohabited this one single place. But the location to the vein of tungsten alloy was indeed here. At the very center of this forest was a single cave that could only be seen and entered by through a ravine. Evening in this place was a place with little to no visibility, thanks to the fact that the sun would drop far beneath the horizon and bask the entire forest with darkness. The darkness had been pierced, however, by a single orb of azure and yellow. It had been Jian Chun and Tynes, who were traveling to the entrance of the ravine with Jian Chen's flying abilities. The arrival of the two figures had immediately alerted the figures hidden in the forest down below. At the sight of Tynes, they had all moved to salute the two. Captain. Tynes had turned back to look at Jian Chun. Imperial Protector, these are all men of the Earth Saint Master level, and are men worthy of my trust to protect the secret of this mine. Satisfactory work. Jian Chun smiled to each and every single one of the men there. Laughing, Tynes spoke to his men next. Scatter yourselves and hide once more. But keep a watch out for anyone else that approaches. Kill them on sight. Yes, each person saluted in response before transforming back into the shadows and out of sight to blend in with the surrounding of the ravine. Imperial Protector, the vein of tungsten alloy was completely discovered by accident in this ravine. Tynes pointed out. Come show me the way. Jian Chun and Tynes quickly descended down into the rather shallow and narrow ravine. It was more of a gully rather than ravine, due to the fact that there had been grass growing here and there in large quantities. Surveying the grass from above, Jian Chun slowly closed his eyes and allowed his presence to expand into the surrounding 50 kilometers and penetrating any solid wall that might obstruct his way. Under the strong detection abilities of his presence, Jian Chun had been able to see through the boulders and walls, as if they weren't even there. But, when his presence snaked into the area below, Jian Chun couldn't help but let out a sigh from his lips. This place was practically a giant mountain of tungsten alloy, with a purity that matched perfectly with Tynes' description. The tremendous quantity of the tungsten alloy had been enough to leave even Jian Chun tongue-tied. And with his presence, he had been able to dig 5 meters deep into the ground to probe out the area even more. It had been to his even bigger shock that there was even more tungsten alloy, that what was initially measured the extent in which the vein extended to was more than enough to leave any man utterly inconsolable even. Now knowing the situation behind the hidden cave side, Jian Chun could finally let out a breath in relief. Before, his heart had been pacing wildly from what he was witnessing, but now, he was already back to his original state of mind. And now that his emotions had been completely quelled, Jian Chun began to extend outwards with his presence once more. Deeper and deeper, his presence had started to investigate just how deep this hidden vein of tungsten alloy had gone. With the vast speed of his presence extending into the ground, Jian Chun had soon enough reached roughly 10 kilometers deep into the ground. Thanks to his skill with spreading his presence, Jian Chun could conclude that this had been a very pure vein all in all. The deeper he looked, the purer the vein was. And now that he was 10 kilometers deep, Jian Chun could see that the purity of this vein was at least 90% or perhaps even close to 100. In other words, this was no longer a mine of tungsten alloy, but a subterranean area completely made of tungsten alloy. Faced with such a discovery, Jian Chun had been hard-pressed to quell his emotions this time. It had been with such excitement that his entire body began to shake, but he did not stop his investigation and continued onwards. 11 kilometers, 12 kilometers, 13 kilometers, 14 kilometers. Soon enough, Jian Chun had reached his limits to which he could extend to with his presence at 15 kilometers. But at that point, Jian Chun's expression had took on a startled change. Just slightly beneath the 15th kilometer point, Jian Chun could just barely detect an abnormally strong surge of energy with his presence. It was almost as if there had been a barrier preventing him from detecting anything else underneath the protective layering. Even the immensity of the barrier itself was an unknown variable to him. What is that? Jian Chun murmured to himself. This sudden oddity had been far outside Jian Chun's expectations. It had been unfortunate that his presence was not enough to go beyond this 15-kilometer stop point, as he had no other way to investigate what this strange energy was. The next step had been to investigate the surrounding area with his presence, before finally withdrawing it. It had been with furrowed eyebrows that he stared down below at the ground as he tried to think. This occurrence had brought a great deal of curiosity onto him, and completely overshadowed the joy he felt from the discovery of far down the tungsten alloy went. If only my presence was strong enough. As things stand now, it's futile to try and see what lies beyond that barrier. But I can at the very least explore it in the future. Jianchen thought to himself. Right by Jianchen's side, Tynes had noticed the puzzled look on Jianchen's face and asked out in concern, "Imperial Protector, what is the matter?" "Tynes, what is the history behind this valley? Is there perhaps any legends about this place?" Jianchen asked. "I have heard no such thing before." Tynes shook his head after racking his mind for any pertinent information. Letting out a sigh in defeat, Jianchen looked around the entire valley with his presence. For about 20 meters beyond this area, the tungsten alloy had already deteriorated into a purity rate of 50%. And by 50 meters, the amount of tungsten alloy was practically nil with just stone and dirt left in its place. With the entire valley investigated, Jianchen could finally ascertain that the heart of the tungsten alloy was located within a diameter of 100 meters of this place. The tungsten alloy at the very heart of the valley was the purest at about 85% purity. Now that his investigations was completely over, Jianchen and Tynes returned back to the headquarters of the Blood Moon mercenaries. At the very top of the castle in which the Blood Moon mercenaries were located at, Jianchen could be seen conversing with Tynes and the other high-ranking members of the Blood Moon mercenaries. Excavate the tungsten alloy as soon as you can while ensuring that no one learns of its existence. There should be no reason that anyone should learn about it. Tynes, I'll leave it up to you to deal with this, Jianchen commanded. But Imperial Protector, the purity of these ores is already an issue to be considered. Combined with the magical properties of the tungsten alloy, that makes it 100 times stronger than reinforced steel. A year wouldn't be enough time to make even a single dent in the amount of ores. A black-robed elder spoke. This elder in particular was an Earth Saint Master, and a senior figure of the mercenaries. Imperial Protector, I've already notified the head of the other 6 heads. Should we tell them the news as well? Perhaps have them choose a single reliable person to go extract the ore? Tynes offered. Yes, I can agree to that notion. Wait until those 6 arrive, and then tell them the news. Jianchen spoke. Half a month later, the rest of the 6 heads had finally assembled at the headquarters of the Blood Moon mercenaries. With all 7 gathered, Jianchen could re-engage in another series of secret discussions, and allowed for everyone to be delegated on their tasks to extract the ore. This meeting had taken a significantly longer amount of time as Jianchen had to discuss several aspects of confidentiality with the 7 Heaven Saint Masters. Preliminary matters such as who would extract the ore, who would transport it, and who would refine it in secret. On the second day, Tynes had immediately led 500 of his most trustworthy men to go extracting the ore on pretense of hunting for magical beasts. Simultaneously, the other 6 leaders had dispatched several of their men in different areas of the mountain range for reconnaissance. With the combined actions of the 7, information of the tungsten alloy had been completely suppressed, and the tungsten alloy was finally being extracted. Under the command of Jianchen, the entire valley had been surveyed and mined. He had still been very curious about that mysterious barrier several kilometers down beneath the earth, but because of the tungsten alloy in his way, Jianchen had no way to get closer to it. The only way would be to dig a path down. The next few days had been very calm and peaceful. For the sake of hiding the fact that they were extracting tungsten alloy, Jianchen had been the only one left to oversee the miners along with Tynes. The other leaders had returned to their own territories, so as to avoid any insightful person from connecting the dots and realizing something was amiss. But even with that, the 7 had established a means of quick communication between each other. If there was even the slightest deviation away from the plans, they would all be notified and would arrive at the castle of the Blood Moon mercenaries as fast as they could. 10 days later, the Flame mercenaries had all been rushed to the Blood Moon mercenaries' territory. Finally garrisoning themselves within the castle, The 3 Heaven Saint Masters and 500 Earth Saint Masters had been included into the group, making the Blood Moon mercenaries stronger than before. Jian Chun had not hidden the fact of the tungsten alloy from Ming Dong and the others, and had told them about it. But Zhang Tian, the other captains, and the Heaven Saint Masters remained clueless about the ore. When the time came for them to understand the magnitude of the tungsten alloy, each one of them had been so shocked that their jaws dropped wide open. A tremendous deposit of tungsten alloy like this is extremely rare on the continent. Should this make its way out, there will definitely be turmoil all over the place. Even a few of the isolated families, or the 8 great powers would mobilize with such an event. With our strength alone, it would be difficult to maintain this. Huang Wan remarked grimly. Equally grim, Jian Chun nodded his head. I've already locked down on the information. If the time comes for this to leak out, then I will have the Qin Huang kingdom step in. My Huang family is strong. If there is a need for it, then I'll have the ancestor of my family step in as well. Chapter 596. Return to Mercenary City. 2. Jian Chen's eyes had lit up when he heard Huang Wan's suggestion. He did not know just how strong the saint ruler was, but if he was able to go toe-to-toe with 2 other saint rulers, then he would definitely belong to the higher echelons of the chart. In the case that a saint ruler did help him, then very few people would dare work against him. Wait until for the situation to arise first before we call on your ancestor to help us. Jian Chun smiled. Aside from the 4 imperial protectors from the Qin Huang kingdom, he had also the ancestor of the Huang family to help him. With those 5, Jian Chun had no desire to use them at the wrong moment. As for Ming Dong's uncle figure, Jian Chun had no delusions that he would be able to ask for his assistance. The saint ruler was very unwilling to complicate himself with any external affairs, and even the priceless tungsten alloy would not be enough to shake his neutrality. But there had been no leaks of the information at all in regards to the tungsten alloy. Aside from Jian Chen's group, only the 7 leaders and their men had known about it. The excavators had all their storage items confiscated during their time in the mines in order to prevent news or evidence from being spread. Even their movements had been limited to only 10 meters beyond the mines. The Flame Mercenaries had been stationed within the castle of the Blood Moon Mercenaries whilst all of this was going on. When the 7 leaders heard that it was Jian Chun himself who led the group, they had immediately announced their own desires to join the Flame Mercenaries. And now with the inclusion of those 7, the Flame Mercenaries had exploded once more in strength. The entirety of the land that had been the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom was fully engulfed by Jian Chun, and the amount of experts within the land had been plentiful. Aside from Jian Chun, there were nearly a dozen other Heaven Saint Masters included amongst the mercenaries, making the Flame Mercenaries a household name within the surrounding 100,000 kilometers. The following days had been calm in comparison to the news from above, with the tungsten alloy being extracted methodically. Every day, an abundant amount of the ore would be collected, and the key figures in the operation such as Jian Chun had been all the happier to see it. When all of the tungsten alloy is extracted, we'd definitely have enough to use them for our city. Ming Dong spoke with a quavering voice. If this tungsten alloy were to be used to build the city, then the defensive strength it would boast would be enough to be one of the strongest cities on the continent. Even the 7 capital cities would be equal to us. Even the normally quiet-spoken Duga Feng had been filled with an expectant look in his eyes. We could even use the tungsten alloy to create a large amount of armor for the elite soldiers to wear. Bai Lian piped up in excitement. Everyone had been quick to suggest what they should do with the tungsten alloy. All they needed to do was wait for a definitive number of just how much tungsten alloy had been mined, and they could go ahead with their plan. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed for Jian Chen's stay in the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. Nothing out of the ordinary had happened within these 3 months, and the lockdown on the tungsten alloy had been as strict as ever. The tension from safeguarding this secret had been extremely large on Jian Chen's heart. However, early one morning, Jian Chen had only just opened his eyes from his seated position on his bed to look out the window. In his mind, memories of the little fatty he met in Longevity Valley suddenly cropped up out of nowhere. I promised to meet him again in a single year after I left the valley. It's about time that I make true on that promise and visit the valley. Jianchen muttered as he stepped out from his room. In the past few months, he had remembered about that fatty several times, but because of the matters on hand, he had to put off the trip until later. But now that there was no foreseeable changes in the extraction of the tungsten alloy, he saw no need to delay the trip to Longevity Valley any longer. As soon as he walked out from his room, Jianchen had convened with the others once more to announce that he would be leaving for a short period of time. Jianchen, where are you going? Let me go with you. Huang Luan asked in reluctance to part away from Jianchen again. I have an important matter to return to Mercenary City for, but I'll be home soon enough, so remain here in the meanwhile. Jianchen shook his head to decline. A disappointed look appeared in her eyes after that. Jianchen, go quick and return early. Yu had been equally reluctant to part with Jianchen. Despite her reluctance, however, she knew that this trip was unavoidable for him. Nodding his head, Jianchen spoke. If nothing happens, I should be home soon. Ming Dong walked forward to slap Jianchen on the shoulder to speak seriously. Brother, if you need to go, then we will not stop you. But you have to be careful. In the case that the Jetta clan and the Shi family see you, you must head for Mercenary City. They won't dare touch you there. Laughing, Jianchen replied, Worry not. I know just how to handle that should the situation occur. But aside from their saint rulers, I should have no problem with the rest of their families. Out of nowhere, Bai Lian had cropped up around his arm. Cousin, your little relative has a wish that I hope you can fulfill. She spoke. Seeing the coquettish actions of his younger cousin, Jianchen could only laugh. Say it then. Whatever it is that you want, your cousin will make sure to accomplish it for you. For his own younger cousin, Jianchen was a very doting figure. Whirling her head to look at the little tiger on Jianchen's shoulder, she spoke with a mischievous smile. Could you leave behind Xiaobai? I want to play with it. The tiger was a very intelligent creature, and had understood exactly what Bai Lian was asking for. As quick as lightning, it had jumped over from Jianchen's left shoulder to right shoulder to avoid Bai Lian, and hugged at Jianchen's neck tightly with its paws and eyes that stared vigilantly at Bai Lian. As if annoyed by what the tiger cub had done, Bai Lian stared at it with her arms at her waist. Xiaobai, am I really that scary? I fed you some roasted meat the past few days, and this is how you repay me? You won't even let me hug you. Mrrr. Xiaobai had let loose a mournful sound that not everyone had understood, but its paws had only gripped around Jianchen's neck. Even tiger, meaning that it was very reluctant to split with Jianchen. Forget it, Bai Lian. Xiaobai may as well be Jianchen's shadow. You'd have a better chance climbing the ladder into the heavens than to separate Xiaobai from Jianchen. Yu giggled. Bai Lian, this is a request that I can't help you with. I am not one to force Xiaobai to do what it doesn't want. Jianchen smiled apologetically. Forget it then. Bai Lian glared balefully at Xiaobai in disappointment. With Xiaobai on his shoulders still, Jianchen bade farewell to the rest of the group and left. He had originally wanted to leave Xiaobai here instead of carrying it over with him, since he would have to pass Mercenary City to reach Longevity Valley. It was a trip that did not guarantee security, but the tiger cub had been completely deaf to any words Jianchen had said to it. Unable to convince the tiger cub, he could only allow for the cub to go with him. It had been extraordinarily good weather today. The sun was shining bright, and not a single cloud could be seen, leaving the sky a boundless canvas of azure. Flying 1,000 meters high into the sky, Jianchen headed straight for the Dazhou Kingdom, so that he could use their space gate to reach Mercenary City. Because of the growth that the tiger cub went through, its sense of smell had improved by several degrees as well. Every so often when Jianchen flew over a forest, it would just barely be able to sniff out the heavenly resources hidden throughout the verdant plants. Some had been over 1,000 years old in age, and shocked even Jianchen. It had been as Rum Guinness had said. The tiger cub would gain the ability to search and find heavenly resources with its own strength. It took several days for Jianchen to arrive at the frontier of the Dazhou Kingdom. But as soon as he hit that line, Jianchen came to a stop mid-flight. Thinking for a bit longer, he immediately flew off in a different direction than before. Just several hours after he had changed directions, Jianchen had left the Dazhou kingdom and arrived at the bordering kingdom of the Wuxia kingdom. Heading within its borders, Jianchen flew straight for the first-class city, Walorant City. Within the area of the city, Jianchen touched down onto a relatively empty location and followed his memories through the city, before finally coming to a stop right outside a large mansion. The mansion that Jianchen had stopped in front of had a giant signboard right above it saying, Tianqin Clan. These two words had a seemingly magical feeling to them and brought forth a deluge of memories from several years ago. Unable to stop himself, Jianchen began to replay the memories of when he and Ming Dong first came to this city. In Walorant City, it had been Qin Xiao that had left the biggest impression on Jianchen. Hey you there! What are you doing spacing out in front of the gates of the Tianqin clan? Get lost, this isn't a place you can block the road. In the middle of Jianchen's thoughts, one of the guards had let out a shout and disrupted him. Waking back up to reality, Jianchen looked at the burly figure next to him and cupped his hands in a polite greeting. Would you perhaps know if the young master Qin Xiao is inside? Stopping in his stride to size Jianchen up, the guard had taken notice that the robes Jianchen wore was quite expensive, and the air to him had been unordinary. Immediately growing wary, the guard asked, Who are you? The young master Qin Xiao is not someone that anyone could see on a whim. This one is Jianchen, a friend of the young master Qin Xiao. Jianchen cupped his hands. Despite this person being only a guard, he had been calm and polite to him. What? You're Jianchen? The guard had immediately been surprised to hear that name. Straight away, the expression on his face had changed to have a smile on it. Ah, so it is indeed Lord Jianchen. This lowly guard must be blind if I could not recognize Lord Jianchen. Please forgive me, Lord Jianchen. The young master Qin Xiao had said before that should Lord Jianchen arrive, we are to bring him straight in. The guard welcomed Jianchen within the compound politely, while then notifying another guard to report to Qin Xiao. Chapter 597. Return to Mercenary City 3. Received once more into the Tianqin clan. Jianchen had been once more honored into the compound, just like with his last arrival here. Even the head and the senior figures of the clan had made their way over to the halls to greet Jianchen. Jianchen was, after all, the king of mercenaries, and a figure that the Tianqin clan would not dare bear arrogance with. Even as he was being warmly received, Jianchen had finally met up with Qin Xiao once more. Years may have gone past, but there had been no significant changes in Qin Xiao, whether it was in personality or body. There had been a tremendous increase in his strength, however, as he was now an Earth Saint Master. The moment when Qin Xiao saw Jianchen, he had been ecstatic and wrapped him into a hug. Hey Jianchen! I've been waiting for you return. Any later, and I would have gone looking for you instead. Untying himself from the embrace, Jianchen gave a cursory appraisal of Qin Xiao before approving of the change. Not bad. You've become an Earth Saint Master. What a talent you have. If I'm not wrong, you've only just hit the age of 30. A 30-year-old becoming an Earth Saint Master. That's an achievement that the entire Tianyuan continent would regard as true talent. Replying for his son, the head of the Tianqin clan laughed with pride. Qiner is talented indeed. Even in our Wuxia kingdom, there is not a single person that holds as much potential as he does. Just half a year ago, the king himself had betrothed his daughter to Qiner. Many of the other factions of the kingdom have already tried their hand at arranging a marriage as well. Nodding at the man, Jianchen looked to Qin Xiao. Qin Xiao, is that true? You're wedded now? There had been an embarrassed look on Qin Xiao's face when faced with the question. Laughing, he said, the wedding day has already been established. In 2 years' worth of time, I will be wed to the third princess of the Wuxia kingdom. Jianchen, you and Ming Dong have to make sure that you will attend my wedding. Of course we will. Jianchen laughed with joy over Tianqin's excitement. Moving on, Jianchen and Qin Xiao had walked deeper within the courtyards of the clan to talk as they pleased. Entirely out of the blue, Qin Xiao blurted out a single question as soon as they were alone. Jianchen, Although I am not of the same level of strength as Brother Mingdong, I am still an Earth Saint Master, and a man capable of my own decisions. I've stayed within the Tianqing clan long enough. Would it be possible for me to follow you in your travels through the continent? Really? Of course you can. As things turn out, I have founded a mercenary group that is short of people I can trust at the moment. If you're willing, why not join my mercenary group? Jianshan laughed. Coincidentally enough, Qin Xiao began with a bright look in his eyes. I had been entertaining the notion of creating a mercenary group with you. But since you've beaten me to the punch, then I'll save my breath. Jianshan, when will we leave then? Staying around in the Tianqing clan has bored me to death. I've had half a mind to leave earlier already. Evasively, Jianshan shook his head when he saw the impatient look on Qin Xiao's face. I estimate that there'll be some time before then. I've still a trip to Mercenary City and the surrounding area. When I come back from then, I'll be able to bring you over to the mercenary group I've made to take a look. Not even a moment after Jianshan finished speaking, the gentle and refined sounds of a zither could be heard being played. The notes had been delightful and pleasant to the ears, as if they were filled with an enchanting type of magic to captivate any listener. The music had been so much that Qin Xiao and Jianshan had stopped in their conversation for just a moment. By listening to the music of HD zither, the two of them had grown calm and tranquil like undisturbed water. At a pavilion nearby, a single white-robed young woman could be seen seated on a stone table as she plucked at the strings of her zither. It was almost as if the entire world around her had harmonized with her music, as even the flowers and the grass nearby would sway and turn with the rhythm of the beat, and the wind would harmonize with her notes. Right. My younger sister enjoys playing the zither in her spare time. Compared to the past, her ability in playing it has improved so much that even I can't help but feel intoxicated by the music she plays. Qin Xiao sighed in approval of his sister's music. Yes, your sister has grown skillful in the art of the zither, if she is able to influence the heart and mind of a human with her music. Jianshan agreed. The effects of her music had been more than enough for Jianshan to really believe was possible. Calmly walking over to the pavilion with Qin Xiao, the two of them sat at a nearby table to listen to the next ballad of the zither without disturbing her. If the second daughter of the Tianqing clan saw Jianshan and Qin Xiao enter her audience of one, she did not make notice of it. Even her eyes had remained unmoving as she focused completely on her zither to play earnestly. In this one moment, her eyes were solely glued on her zither, and nothing else in the world had mattered to her. The ballad continued on for some time, before finally receding away into silence. Her tender fingers paused in its movements as she lifted her eyes away from the zither at last, and then onto Jianshan and Qin Xiao who were nearby. Her eyes had registered them with a bright gleam of light that contained a lively look to them, as if it were sentient. Yet her face had been covered by a single piece of cloth when she smiled at the two, making her exact appearance unclear. Brother, my apologies, I've kept you waiting. My lord Jianshan, I had no idea you would come in either. There had been a faint smile on Jianshan's own face when he nodded, but when he was about to speak, Qin Xiao had cut in first. Sister, you spend more than enough time wearing that veil outside. Why do you wear it in our own home as well? Wearing this veil has become something of a habit for me. To take it off now would be a strange change. She replied softly. Turning to Jianshan, she spoke. If I remember correctly, the last time we met, Lord Jianshan, it was a year ago. Have you been well since our last meeting? A bright smile appeared on his face. Worry not, this one has done well. On the other hand, you seem to have made great progress in the art of the zither, I see. This girl has been studying the art of the zither for as long as she's lived. Every day I try my best to study and dedicate myself to the art. Even now, my skills are still lacking in comparison to someone like the famous heavenly enchantress. Jianshan's heart had skipped a beat when he heard mention of that name. Perhaps you wish to follow the heavenly enchantress' footsteps, and wish to delve into the way of the zither rather than Saint Force? I bet so. My sister has always been a smart one with a power of comprehension stronger than others. Even her skill in cultivation is decent, But what made my father disappointed was her lack of motivation to continue with her cultivation. As a result, she is only at the 5th layer of Saint Force, and spends her time focusing on the zither instead. Although the ballads she plays are captivating, it's rather useless against an enemy. Qin Xiao shrugged his shoulders noncommittally. The fact that his own sister was so entranced by the zither had been a source of a headache for him, since he did not see any applicable way it could be used for cultivation. Even though her brother had criticized the usefulness of the zither, she did not grow angry. Instead, she explained, "Brother, you underestimate the zither. I have not yet reached the beginning steps of the way of the zither, that's all. The profound mysteries of the music that a zither produces is something you couldn't possibly imagine. In the case that one truly embarks on this path of cultivation, then the fighting prowess they bring is far beyond what Saint Force could compare to. Aside from the heavenly enchantress, I have never heard of anyone else using the music of a zither as a way of cultivation. Sister, you don't have any guidance nor teachings on how to embark on this path. To try and find this path by yourself is difficult. Why not just cultivate with Saint Force instead?" Qin Xiao pleaded, but she had shaken her head in response. "This is what I plan to do with my life. I will use all of my energy to accomplish my goal, and even if there lies nothing at the end of my path, I will not regret it." Qin Xiao, if your sister is so set on this path, then let her walk the path she chooses. Although the music your sister plays is far below what is needed to fully captivate the soul of a person, it has reached a point of maturity in its own right. As long as she continues to practice and study, your sister will grow and learn. She will definitely reach the way of the zither she talks of. Qin Xiao could only sigh in response to Jian Chen's words. In his mind, he really couldn't approve of the arduous path his sister set for herself. "Thank your Lord Jian Chen for your encouragement. My name is Qin Qin. Please feel free to call me so in the future, rather than sister of Qin Xiao, my lord." She smiled, but behind the veil, the smile had been hard to distinguish. "Qin Qin," Jian Chen spoke to herself. "So your name was that? It is a delightful sounding name that suits a lady like yourself." The lively light in Qin Qin's eyes danced as she looked at Jian Chen and nodded. Without another word, her eyes went back to the old-looking zither on the table, and her fingers moved to caress the strings of it once more to induce a melodious sound. Looking at the zither, Jian Chen hesitated for a moment. "Miss Qin Qin, this one has once had the pleasure of meeting the heavenly enchantress in Mercenary City before. In the future, should I meet her again, this one will ask to see if she will impart any guidance onto you." Qin Qin's eyes had lit up at the sound of that. "Then I will be in your care, my lord, to ask for the heavenly enchantress to be my master. That alone has been the greatest desire of mine since young." Jian Chen had not remained in the Tianqing clan long after that. Talking briefly with Qin Xiao and Qin Qin for a moment longer, he finally left the clan, after a small discussion with Qin Xiao about the next thing he had to accomplish. Leaving behind Walorant City, Jian Chen flew back towards the Dazhou Kingdom once more. Afterwards, it had been an uneventful trip, as Jian Chen finally crossed over into the Dazhou Kingdom, and into the palace where he had the king welcome him in. There had been no obstructions for Jian Chen to use the space gate to travel hundreds of thousands of kilometers, to reappear on the other side in the forests near Mercenary City. Confirming his own position on a map, Jian Chen rose into the air, and shot off away into the skies towards the city. He had planned on entering Mercenary City, to not only buy several things for Elder Xiao, but he had also hoped that there would be anything else worthy of his notice in the city. Chapter 598. Return to Mercenary City 4. Mercenary City was situated at the very center of the entire continent, as if to serve as the heart of the land. Although there were no walls, the territory that the city spanned over was no less than the 7 capital cities. In name, it was the most well-known city in the continent, and in the heart of every single mercenary, Mercenary City was the very symbol of divinity. As the holy grounds for every mercenary, the name of the city itself represented freedom and peace. Within Mercenary City, A series of complicated regulations and laws were put into place to uphold the security and peace of the city. There was no division between the strong and the weak. Even if it was a heaven saint master, their status was no different than from the common villager. Everywhere else on the continent, the law of the jungle reigned supreme. But here, that law was non-existent. Fighting was prohibited within the area of the city, and the very moment any single person entered the city, even the strongest wouldn't be able to use their strength without fearing the consequences. This prohibition had thus led to many people referring to Mercenary City as the safest asylum to live in. As long as one lived here, there would be no need to worry about being chased down and killed by anyone. In the course of history, there had been plenty of people that disregarded this law and broke it. But each and every single one of these lawbreakers had been killed without mercy, even the Heaven Saint Masters. Coincidentally, there had never been a case of murder that happened within the city. The only thing that could serve to establish your status within the city was money. With money, one would be able to live a life that even a prince would envy. Without money, one would have to live on the streets. Even finding food would prove to be a challenge. With the tiger cub in hand, Jianchen flew across the skies at a steady pace. From afar, a series of large buildings could be seen stretching into the skies. From above, Jianchen could just barely see the transparent barrier that surrounded the entirety of the city. His eyes carefully studied the barrier with curiosity. He had only been to Mercenary City once before, but even that had only given him a small portion of information when it came to the city. He knew of several things such as the fact that it was forbidden to fight within the city, and that the barrier that spanned across the sky had to do with that prohibition. Because of the fact that Mercenary City had no walls, a series of roads and streets intersected one another throughout the entire area. With roads leading in and out of the place, mercenaries could travel through the city along with their carts in numerous amounts. Despite the fact that there were no guards stationed anywhere, none of these mercenaries had acted as unruly as they might be out in the wildlands of the continent. No matter where they were in the city, they acted nice and polite. Touching down onto the ground several kilometers away from the barrier, Jianchen walked the rest of the way. Without a care for the nearly transparent barrier, he walked through and into Mercenary City. As soon as he entered the city, Jianchen bought a Class 3 magical beast for him to ride throughout the city. Combined with the fact that Mercenary City was large, and that Jianchen was prohibited from flying, Jianchen would have to ride a magical beast mount if he wished to get to his destination swiftly. Riding on top of the magical beast, Jianchen traveled slowly through the major streets of the city to buy all sorts of delicacies from the street stalls. These were all gifts for the natives of Longevity Valley. Little Fatty, most especially. He had never once traveled outside the valley and knew nothing about the outside world. This by extension meant that he had never once experienced the delicacies of the continent. For half the day, Jianchen walked through the streets. Using the money saved in his space ring, Jianchen had gone on a wild shopping spree and had managed to fill up 5 whole space belts before he had been satisfied. Hopping onto his mount, Jianchen then rode straight for the drug stores. About an hour later, Jianchen arrived at a 5-layered pavilion. This was where all sorts of priceless heavenly resources could be bought and sold from within the city. More. As soon as Jianchen and the tiger cub arrived in front of the pavilion, the tiger cub had caught a whiff of the fragrant aroma from the heavenly resources. Calling out with excitement from its spot in Jianchen's robe with such force, if not for the tight grip Jianchen had on it, the cub would have dashed into the pavilion. He had tried his best to hide the faint smile on his face when he saw the impatience of the cub. Heavenly resources all over the age of 1,000 were very rare in the Jessen kingdom, and so it had gone for a very long time without tasting such a delicacy like that. With the cub in hand, Jianchen strode into the pavilion. There were plenty of other customers shopping around the place, ranging from mercenary to merchant to attendants, dashing around the place to help service everyone. From their mouths, talks of discussion about what item to buy could be heard. Several of the mercenaries could be seen buying even the several hundred-year-old ones. Looking around the place, Jianchen could see that the first story of the pavilion sold several priceless drugs, but not a single heavenly resource could be seen. This way of merchandise selling was not unfamiliar to Jianshan. He knew that the more expensive wares would be on the higher levels of the pavilion. So without further ado, Jianshan walked up to the second story. On this level, the more expensive types of drugs could be seen along with several heavenly resources. The ages of these ones were below the age of 500, but even here on this second floor had plenty of customers. Again, without looking around, Jianshan headed for the third floor. But when he reached the stairwell entrance, a guard moved to stop him. "My apologies, sire, but the third floor onwards is restricted to customers with a purple card." This guard spoke apologetically. Without a word, Jianshan flashed several purple cards for the man to see. At the sight of them, the guard had relinquished the path to allow for Jianshan to continue on his way with a smile. Compared to the second floor, the third floor was quite peaceful. Only a few scant people could be seen haggling prices with the attendants here. And on this floor, Jianshan could finally see some of the more sealed heavenly resources displayed here and there. Right below the caseboard, their prices were clearly written, with a bottom line price of 10,000 purple coins. Some of the more ancient wares had surpassed even 15,000 purple coins. That had been an exorbitant price. The 1,000-year-old heavenly resources had caused the tiger cub to open its eyes wide and start to lick its lips in anticipation. "My lord, how may I serve you today?" A 20-something-year-old woman attendant suddenly came into view. Slowly walking up to one of the more well-preserved heavenly resources, Jianshan spoke. "I wish to speak some business with you. Have your shopkeeper come out to talk." She had looked at Jianshan oddly, but without any further complaint, she went off to look for the shopkeeper. Soon enough, a middle-aged woman with grandiose-looking robes came following the previous attendant in. Coming to a stop right in front of Jianshan, the attendant smiled and introduced Jianshan to the man. "My lord, this figure here is the shopkeeper." Looking Jianshan up and down, the woman gave a small smile on her face. "My name is Wuxia, shopkeeper of this pavilion. Might I ask to know your name, my lord? You give me a familiar feeling, as if I have seen your visage somewhere before." Smiling in return, Jianshan spoke. "Shopkeeper Wuxia, let us talk business. Does your store happen to have any heavenly resources over the age of 1,000? Seeing that Jianshan was unwilling to disclose his identity, Wuxia had decided not to push it any further and smiled. "Certainly we have several of those heavenly resources in stock, but not by much. In total, there are 28 of them over the age of 1,000. My lord, if you are asking such a question, do you perhaps mean to purchase them?" "Shopkeeper Wuxia, please calculate the total price of the 28 then." Jianshan replied. The woman had been taken aback. Uncertain of how to phrase the question, she asked anyways. "My lord, do you mean to say that you wish to purchase all 28 of them? That will certainly not be a small sum of money." Jianshan nodded his head and spoke no more of the issue. With that confirmation, a smile had lit up on Wuxia's face. A customer purchasing over 20,000-year-old heavenly resources was an extremely rare sight to be seen. Hurriedly taking out an abacus, Wuxia started to total up the sum of all the items. "My lord," she began, "each of the 28 heavenly resources have varying ages. Some are just 1,000 years old, some are 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Combined with the fact that some of them are of rare species, each one of the heavenly resources will be of different prices. As such, the cumulative price will be 1,030,000 purple coins. If my lord is willing to purchase them in bulk, then we will discount the remaining 30,000 purple coins for a grand total of 1,000,000 purple coins. Is that to your satisfaction?" "Correct. Then the 28 heavenly resources will be bought for 1,000,000 purple coins." Jianshan handed a purple card over to Wuxia. He knew somewhat of the pricing of heavenly resources, and so even though the ages of the heavenly resources were all different, Jianshan knew that the price given to him had been a very fair one. In the smaller cities, heavenly resources such as these would be priced for far higher. Taking the purple card into her trembling hands, Wuxia spoke. "Should my lord ever come to my pavilion for any future 1,000-year-old heavenly resources, this servant here will be sure to give a favorable price." With a small hum to himself, Jianchen spoke. Shopkeeper Okire, would you perhaps have any heavenly resources over the age of 10,000? What? Heavenly resources above the age of 10,000? Okire had been astounded. Regarding Jianchen with a stupefied look, she answered, My lord, how could heavenly resources of that age possibly be that easy to find? 10,000-year-old heavenly resources are something that the entire Tianyuan continent can only stumble upon once in a while. Not only are they impossible to find in markets, each time one appeared, they are worth countless of purple coins. They are something that could allow people to become anew, and are known to many as ingredients to immortality. Many of the experts standing at the zenith of the continent would use such things to extend their lifespans even. Perhaps shopkeeper Okire knows of a place where such heavenly resources could be purchased at? Jianchen pressed on. Pausing to think for a moment, Okire then finally responded, According to what I know, 10,000-year-old heavenly resources are all rare. With each appearance of one, they have shown up in only the capital cities and mercenary city. To my knowledge, they have appeared once every 3 years or so amongst the 7 capital cities, and once a year here. A tremendous auction house always follows 2 days after its announcement, so if my lord is still in need of one, then your best luck would be at the auction house. Chapter 599, Spirit of the Barrier, 1. Shopkeeper Okire, thank you for your information. Jianchen cupped his hands in gratitude. But where might this yearly auction house take place? There are plenty of auction houses in this city after all. Perhaps you are not as familiar to Mercenary City as I thought if you know not even this, my lord. Okire spoke in between a small burst of laughter. Then please allow this servant to explain. There are indeed plenty of auction houses within Mercenary City, but those are all privately owned auction houses. There is only a single auction house that is regulated by the entire Mercenary City. As long as my lord makes the proper inquiries, you will learn of the place almost instantly. It is how this auction house is run, and what it sells that marks it different from the others. With Mercenary City itself running the auction every year, many extremely rare objects can be seen from it, ergo the 10,000-year-old heavenly resource. They have always been sold off by this auction house. Relevantly, the 10,000-year-old heavenly resource that my lord wishes for will always appear here. But each time they appear, it has always been a fight of money to purchase it. If my lord is adamant on purchasing it, then you must prepare yourself to use a large sum of purple coins to purchase it. Indeed, thank you for your warning. Jianchen replied gratefully. The shopkeeper smiled. My lord, you are far too polite. This is nothing that could warrant your thanks. The future patronage of my lord would be more than enough to keep this servant happy. She spoke before handing the purple coins back to Jianchen after processing it. Taking out an exquisite space belt, she handed it over to Jianchen. My lord, here is your purple card, and the heavenly resources are within this belt. Please hold it well. Obediently taking the purple card back into his own space ring, Jianchen took the space belt and inspected the inner contents to ensure everything was there. Smiling, he stored it away into his space ring and left the pavilion after bidding farewell to Okire. Freely walking up to the windowsill, Okire watched as Jianchen walked further and further away into the streets. With furrowed eyebrows, she began to mutter to herself, Just who is that person? It is strange to think that he is familiar to me, as if I've seen him somewhere before. But I have never left Mercenary City as of late, and the amount of acquaintances I have is very few. Where could I have possibly met a youngster like this before? Taking the Class 3 magical beast mount for a ride, Jianchen held a radish-shaped heavenly resource for the tiger cub to munch on. With bright and spirited eyes, the cub devoured the entire thing happily. Heavenly resources for the tiger cub were an extremely rare and delicious delicacy. They were the most delicious and blessed objects in the world to the cub. Eyeing the cub with a small trace of adoration, Jianchen could not help but smile fondly. In the short period of time the cub had been in Jianchen's care, it had managed to worm its way into his heart, so to see the tiger cub so happy, had made him feel equivalently happy. By asking the people of the city, Jianchen had managed to find out the auction house Okire had been talking about. At the center of Mercenary City, this auction house was extremely large and stood at about 30 meters tall. Grand and impressive in its architecture, even in comparison to the mighty city it was in. This auction house was very distinguishable, like the head of a beast out in the open plains. Right as Jianchen was about to take another step, Ziying's voice suddenly popped into his mind. "Ah, Master, this is stardust. Master, we've found some stardust." Repeating Ziying's words, Qingsua spoke up excitedly. "Master, quickly now. Take the stardust with you. That is a priceless item needed to forge the sword." Ignited by the words of Ziying and Qingsua, Jianchen could feel a joyous smile appear on his lips. He knew that in order to craft the azulate swords, he would need a specific amount of materials. And as long as he had those materials, he would be one step closer to forging the said swords. Excited by the two spirits, Jianchen began to question the two. "Ziying, Qingsua, where is this stardust located?" He had no idea what stardust looked like, and so if it were not for the two spirits, he would simply never be able to distinguish it from the entire city. Right away, a strange but mysterious sensation began to pull at his mind as he spoke. In this moment, he could feel a strange attraction, as if some sort of magical connection was drawing him to a very specific location. When Jianchen's eyes hovered over the auction house run by Mercenary City in front of him, a response from within his head could be felt. With this sensation, he could more or less surmise a general approximation that the stardust would be located within this auction house. "Master, you must take the stardust. As long as stardust is added to the swords when being forged, the quality of the blade will go up to a completely different level. It is far away from being a weapon for a god. It can still be considered an ultimate magic weapon." The excited voice of Qingsua reverberated through Jianchen's mind. "Stardust is a material used for weapons of the immortal level. I never would have imagined that they would appear even here. Master, no matter what the cost, you must obtain them." Ziying spoke urgently. It would appear that stardust was an extremely important item to it. Seeing just how much Ziying and Qingsua was putting emphasis on the stardust, Jianchen could feel himself growing serious. His eyes fixated themselves onto the auction house, and immediately dismounted from his magical beast mount to enter. This stardust might have been in the auction house, but the actual house had not yet started any of their auctions, and was thus unavailable to the audience. It would be at least another 2 days before it would start. Perhaps the stardust would appear then. Afterwards, Jianchen had spent the rest of his time walking the streets. Going from one drugstore to another, he purchased another 50 or so thousand-year-old heavenly resources, and spent well over 2 million purple coins. The stab in his wallet had not been a stab to his heart, however. The growth of the tiger was far more important than money, and since the tiger required an exponentially large amount of time to grow, heavenly resources were the only way to expedite this procedure. Jianchen wasn't short on money either, since he took the purple coins from the space rings of the Heaven Saint Masters he killed along with any other valuable item. There was still the money from the treasuries of both the Pingyang Kingdom and the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom that he had not yet exhausted, along with the monster cores. These alone were enough to make Jianchen into a mobile treasury with the raw amount of value he had on him. It was only until dusk that Jianchen finally stopped his window shopping spree through the streets and settled in one of the inns to wait for the auction 2 days from now. There would undoubtedly be heavenly resources over the age of several thousand years old at this auction house, as well as the stardust needed to forge the azulate swords. This meant that the upcoming auction event would definitely be an event that Jianchen couldn't afford to miss. In the same vein, this meant that Jianchen would have to delay his trip to Longevity Valley for another 2 days. Later that evening, in his own grand room, Jianchen sat on top of his bed in the midst of concentration. He had wanted to try his best to come to understand the energy of the world, along with the piece of a saint-tier battle skill, to become a saint ruler as soon as possible. By his side, the tiger cub wolfed down 3 heavenly resources, and quickly fell into a deep slumber to process it into energy. The candle wick within the room had long since gone out, leaving the entire room in pitch-black darkness. Even if one's hand were in front of one's face, the fingers would not be visible at all. But in this darkness, the room was exceptionally quiet, so that even a needle could be heard if it were dropped onto the ground. In the skies above Mercenary City, the gigantic barrier that had spanned across the entire city pulsated once. Shortly afterwards, a single girl's voice could just barely be heard from the skies. This is Master's scent. But didn't Master leave this world already? Why do I smell his scent then? Did Master return then? This clear voice had been clear in the dark skies over the city, but even with the peacefully quiet city, the sound did not travel far. Yes, this is Master's scent. But it's faint. Very faint. Did Master really return? The clear voice reverberated through the skies. From the voice, however, the tint of excitement could be heard. Soon enough, the wave of excitement sped into the city and caused everyone to feel slightly odd. But no one could pinpoint the reason why. I found it. It's here. Master's scent is definitely coming from here. Hee. Master has to have returned. This must be his way of testing me. Hee, how good my nose is. No matter how faint Master's scent is, I will definitely always be able to find it. The voice spoke, this time closer to the city. It had already traveled to the inn Jian Chun was in and phased into the building. From within his room, Jian Chen's ear twitched slightly and caused his eyes to open suddenly. At the same time, 2 bolts of light flew out from his eyes and illuminated the candlewick in the room to light up the room. Jian Chen's eyes swept across the room vigilantly. The darkness was not a problem to him, since he could see everything clearly. Who's speaking? Jian Chen asked seriously. He had heard that clear voice earlier, but his presence had told him no one was around at all, causing him to be extra vigilant. Even if Mercenary City was extremely safe, he could not afford to drop his guard. It's faint. Very faint. Master's scent is here. This time, the strange voice could be heard originating from the same room Jian Chen was in. It had been extremely clear to hear, but no matter how much Jian Chen looked around, he could not see just what human or ghost was speaking. Chapter 600, Spirit of the Barrier, 2. Bolting straight up from his bed, Jian Chen landed gracefully onto the ground with his eyes staring hard at the entirety of the room. With his presence completely spread out so that the entire inn was covered in it, he began to test to see just who was there. But what had disappointed him was the fact that not a single being came into his detection. He had clearly heard the distinguishable voice of a person nearby him earlier. It was not of the same skill that a saint ruler would use to pitch their voice, since a saint ruler would use it to speak directly into the ear. This voice was different. It was a clear voice that anyone within earshot would be able to hear and detect the origin of. But even though it came from his side, the strange and bone-chilling thing was the fact that not a single living thing or spirit could be seen. Who is speaking? Come out now. Jian Chen commanded with a solemn face. This was a first that he had never seen before. As if responding to Jian Chen's question, a previously dark spot near the corner of his room suddenly began to glow with light. Wisps of light began to gather in this one spot and slowly condense to show the silhouette of a person. As the light dissipated from the room, a single young woman, who looked to be around 23 years old, came into view. She had been quite cute and was slightly pink to the eyes. But the only defect in this otherwise beautiful figure was the fact that her body was eerily fake. It was not an actual human body and looked to be made from only light. Following her appearance, light filled the room and dispersed any remaining darkness from it. The iris in Jian Chen's eyes dilated as he stared at the young woman, as if he had seen a ghost. Who are you? Jian Chen growled. Against this foreign threat with untold power, Jian Chen was extremely vigilant. This girl could be an evil being after all. Curiously, the young woman stared at Jian Chen before circling around him several times. Even while she walked around him, her eyes never left his body as she muttered, "It's faint. Master's scent is very faint. But you are clearly not my master. Hey, who are you then?" Her words had rendered Jian Chen at a loss. Scratching his head in befuddlement, Jianchen had still remained calm throughout this. This one is Jianchen. Just who might you be? Why have you come to my room? Jianchen. Her eyebrows rose up as if she was thinking heavily. Who's Jianchen? Jianchen would be me. The muscle in Jianchen's face twitched. Looking at Jianchen, the young woman asked, You're Jianchen? No, you're not my master. My master's name isn't Jianchen. He isn't as weak as you are either. Weird, why do I smell master's scent then? Did I smell wrong? No way. There's no way I would mistake master's scent for someone else. No matter how faint, I will be able to find it. Her eyes then spun around the room several times along with her face as she laughed and giggled at Jianchen. Big brother, why don't you tell little spirit if you've seen my master before? Where is my master? Why has he not come back in forever? Does he not want little spirit anymore? Or even worse, did master forget about me? At the last few words, the young woman's eyes began to grow red, as if she was ready to cry at any moment with sorrow. Seeing just how pathetic the young woman was getting, Jianchen felt an emotion tug away at him from within. It was almost as if he was looking at a small child sadly despairing over the separation from her parents. She was alone and helpless, a pitiful creature to the eyes. Little sister, why don't you tell me who you are? Who is your master? Perhaps I might have seen him before. Jianchen inquired. Right now in his mind, he was trying his best to think of any possible person that could fit the bill as fast as he could. I'm little spirit, but people call me the spirit of the barrier. As for my master, you should know him, he's the lord of this city. She answered. The lord of this city? Jianchen uttered a low grunt of stupefaction. It came to mind that the lord of this city was a divine figure, and when the thought came to mind, Jianchen's face immediately slackened. What did you say? Your master is the lord of Mercenary City? Hee, that's right. Mercenary City is ruled by my master. Big brother, so you do know my master. Tell me where my master is, okay? Big brother, I'm begging you. Her face had lit up when Jianchen had answered her. But then it quickly turned into a look of pleading and pity as she began to beg him. A breath of surprise escaped from Jianchen's lips as he stared dumbfoundedly at this 20-something-year-old woman in front of him. The Lord of Mercenary City, that title had only one person in its history, and that person would be the strongest of the Tianyuan continent, Mo Tianyan. This girl that was right in front of him, her master was actually the one hailed as the strongest of the continent Mo Tianyan. That realization had been like a clap of thunder to his ears. A considerable amount of time had passed before Jianchen had finally regained his wits. Still staring rather shocked at the girl, he just had to ask once more. Little sister, did I hear you correctly? The Lord of Mercenary City, Mo Tianyan, is your master? Even now, Jianchen was doubting what he had heard. Yes, of course. He is Little Spirit's master. Even for her entire life, Little Spirit has not forgotten about master. It was master that gave Little Spirit her name, you know. But master left a long time ago and never saw me again. Little Spirit really misses master. As she got to the end of her words, the little girl's face grew crestfallen. For this one moment she had looked truly alone. As if a bomb had gone off, Jianchen had not known what to think. He could only stare at this girl tongue-tied, while trying to find his mind to respond. This eccentric young woman, was she really a person of the same lifetime of Mo Tianyan? But with that thought, an extremely terrifying question had came to mind that Jianchen couldn't help but start to tremble and shake about. If this young woman was truly a person from the lifetime of Mo Tianyan, then just how long had this person lived for? Big brother, please tell Little Spirit, okay? Where is my master now? Why hasn't he come back for Little Spirit? Little Spirit misses master. While Jianchen had been quiet, the young woman's eyes had already begun to grow teary and pitiful. Even Jianchen had felt a twinge of sympathy when he saw the pathetic expression of hers. The words she was asking for, however, would render anyone speechless, and Jianchen had no idea how to respond. Mo Tianyan was a figure of antiquity. Even if he was the strongest on the continent, even he could not withstand the corrosion of time. Many generations had already passed since his pinnacle, and only the illustrious fame his name brought was left behind. Jianchen had never once seen Mo Tianyan before. Big brother, Please tell little spirit, okay? Where's my master? The silence from Jianchen had prompted the young woman to plead again. Sighing to himself, Jianchen turned to look at the woman with a slight amount of fear. Little sister, I'm afraid to disappoint you, but I have never seen your master before. Impossible. You're lying to little spirit. Little spirit's nose is strong. Big brother, you can't lie to little spirit. Big brother, you have master's scent. You've had to seen master before. She howled in disbelief. Giving a small shake of his head, Jianchen forced out a smile. Little sister, you must be mistaken. I've never seen your master before. Your master may have been the strongest this continent has ever seen before. But too much time has gone by. Your master has to have reached the end of his age span by now. You lie. Master was a magical figure, who already broke free of most of the binds he had. Even age itself. How could he reach the end of his lifespan then? Big brother, you can't lie to little spirit. The very notion of her master dying from age had made her angry beyond belief. Rubbing his temples with some pain, Jianchen was at a loss in how to deal with this noisy woman in front of him now. Big brother, please. You have to tell little spirit where master is, okay? Little spirit will definitely pay you back. This time, she spoke a second phrase to sweeten the deal. Little sister, it's not that I don't wish to tell you. It's that I've never seen your master before in truth. Jianchen spoke helplessly. As if worried now, the young woman began to howl and cry. But, you've clearly master's scent. Even if it's faint, little spirit can smell it. Brother, you have to have seen master before. Is there? Jianchen carefully looked at his own clothes in strange suspicion. This woman in front of him was adamant that he had the scent of Mo Tianyin, but he was absolutely convinced that he had never even seen him before. Then a sudden thought came to Jianchen. Little sister, perhaps I have something that your master left behind. That may be why you sense your master's scent. Is that really it? Big brother, have you really not seen my master before? The young woman's face grew incredulous. I vow that I, Jianchen, have never seen your master before. Jianchen could no longer bear her questioning, and so in order to absolve him from any future questions, he had to pledge in such a manner. Dazed, the young woman stood transfixed to her spot to stare earnestly at Jianchen to try and confirm for herself. After a standoff for what had felt like an eternity, she finally let out a cry of sorrow. Master, where in the world have you gone? Do you no longer want little spirit anymore? Little spirit has missed you so much. Master, where are you? She cried out bitterly. As she cried, her body continued to convulse with shudders, and just slowly, Jianchen could see her body start to fade before finally disappearing, and plunging the entire room back into darkness. Wah! Master, where did you go? You have to come back to find little spirit. Little spirit wants to see you so much. The darkness of the night had continued to convey the grieved crying sounds of the young woman, for some distance, before finally waning off into silence. Jianchen had felt influenced by her tears, and grew uneasy, as he tried to figure out the reason why she had appeared to him in the first place. Rekindling the light once more, Jianchen opened the window covers to look out into the sky. As of right now, it was roughly an hour past midnight, meaning that it was now one of the quietest moments in the city, and so the crying of the young woman would not be heard by many, if any. Shutting the windows once more, Jianchen sat back onto his bed to take out the space ring containing the 3 fist-sized patches of white animal skin, to give it a good look. It would be only these 3 objects that Jianchen knew not the history of, and where they originated from. He had once thought that these 3 patches of animal skin would somehow lead to a hint of the saint ruler, who oversaw the destruction of the Bai family in the past. Perhaps Mo Tianyin left these 3 patches before in the past. Jianchen thought. Chapter 601. 10,000-year-old heavenly resource. While Jianchen could surmise that these 3 pieces had the possibility of being left behind by Mo Tianyin, he really couldn't begin to fathom the mystery behind it. If this was some sort of treasure map, then there was no hint of a path or marking to indicate so on it. It looked to be a regular tuft of animal skin, but it was completely unbreakable and hard to the touch. Turning the 3 pieces around several times, Jianchen finally saw no more benefit to doing so any longer, and stored them back into his space ring. One of the 3 was what remained from the destruction of the Bai family, and Jianchen had no intention on having that leak out. Afterwards, Jianchen stayed within his room for the next 2 days, to when the annual auction would take place, before finally leaving his room. But during these 2 days, the one called Little Spirit hadn't come to him again. Early that morning, Jianchen took hold of the tiger cub and made his way over to where the auction house was to be held. With the purchase of an entry ticket for several purple coins, Jianchen was able to enter the auction house with the throngs of other people. The space within the avenue was extremely spacious and had 7 levels to the main hall. Each level had a multitude of seats that spanned as far as the eye could see. There were at the very least 10,000 of them per level, and with there being 7 levels, that meant at least 70,000 people could be seated here. The auction houses of Mercenary City did not have special guest rooms for people to enjoy, had instead ordinary seatings for everyone. Whether it was the head of an illustrious family or the traveling merchant from some unknown land, they could be seen sitting together despite the gap in status. Still holding the sleeping cub, Jianchen walked up to a corner of one of the levels and carefully waited for the auction to finally start. Roughly 2 hours later, the entire hall had been filled up with people to max capacity. Despite it being filled with over 10,000 people, the entire place had been relatively silent, with everyone patiently waiting for the event to begin. Not a single person had tried to start a ruckus, and even those who were conversing to one another were doing so with whispers. If anything, many of them were using their eyes to do the talking. Just then, the last remaining strands of light within the room dimmed, plunging the entire area into darkness. For a while, this darkness persisted before several intense beams of light suddenly shot forth onto the frontmost podium, for everyone to see clearly. Standing on top of this podium was a beautiful young woman who seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Her appearance had told her to be around 30 years old. The azure blue robes she wore gave her a type of allure that perhaps only the devil itself could offer. In this one moment, a small wooden mallet could be seen on the podium with her. There had been no need for Jianchen to even think to know that this beautiful woman, right there, would be the host of the auction. But what had surprised Jianchen was the fact that this woman was an individual of the Heaven Saint Master level. Heaven Saint Masters were individuals that, if placed in the Jessen Kingdom, would enjoy an illustrious amount of fame. But for such an individual to be used to personally lead an auction house, this was a lavish opportunity that only Mercenary City would be able to afford. With a few words of greeting from the hostess, the auction house had thus officially started. One by one, rare oddities and exotic treasures began to make the stage and be offered to the audience. The entire audience, who had been silent before the auction had finally started to make noise as they shouted out their prices. Middle Earth tier battle skill for those with the Fire Saint Force. Lowest bid is at 50,000 purple coins. A single Class 7 Radiant Spirit pill that can heal even the most grave injuries of a person within minutes. Lowest bid begins at 70,000 purple coins. Class 6 Monster Core, a rare treasure that can rarely be obtained on the continent. A once-in-a-lifetime item. Lowest bid begins at 40,000 purple coins. One by one, the auctioneer would showcase rare items to the entire audience for them to bid and fight over. Each time the bid ended, the winning price was at least 3 times the original amount. Soon enough, 4 hours went by before the auctioneer brought out an antique yet elegant box. As soon as the lid was opened, a fragrant aroma wafted through the air and covered every inch of the entire room, causing several people to grow excited at the smell. From his own seat, Jianchen concentrated his eyes to stare at the box in the auctioneer's hand. He knew that this was something that he needed for himself. Dear audience, I presume that this is not a strange item to everyone here. The object I hold in my hand is an extremely rare heavenly resource. Its name is the geofruit, a fruit that was grown with spirit dirt that was enriched by the energy of the world. For 10,000s of years, the geofruit has existed in the world as an extreme rarity, even amongst the other heavenly resources. Not only does it have a life-changing effect of power strengthening, it can also prolong the age span of the eater. Should an Earth Saint Master or Heaven Saint Master eat it, their lifespan will definitely go up by another 200 years, as well as elevate your power to a whole different realm. The appearance of the geofruit had inflamed the eyes of everyone there with excitement. Each of the Heaven Saint Masters were not lacking in funds by any means, and they had also several large groups to help supplement their wealth should they need it. For those almost at the end of their lifespan, worldly items such as money were nothing important at all. Their lives were far more important. The auctioneer smiled towards the audience to conclude her speech. Well, this servant will delay no longer with the auction. Everyone is well aware of the effects of the geofruit, I'm sure. And so it should go without saying that this is an opportunity that cannot be missed. With the starting price of 500,000 purple coins, with each successive bid defaulting to another 10,000. Begin. 550,000 purple coins. At the end of the auctioneer's declaration, a person had already increased the bid by 5 times the stated default. 600,000. A person to the side of Jianshun had made a bid as well. He was a burly middle-aged man that wore a rich purple robe. His facial appearance was nothing special other than the 2 bright and spirited eyes of his, and the tall sharp eyebrows over them. With those 2 traits and the powerful sword intent that exuded from him, he looked like a strong deity of the sword. Heaven Saint Master. When he had sensed the man's strength, Jianshun had been secretly shocked. As expected, Mercenary City was a place where the strong gathered. It was rare to see Heaven Saint Masters elsewhere, but they were a common sight in the city. 700,000, 800,000. In the short moment after the geofruit was announced, a war between the bidders had already brought the price up to 1,000,000 purple coins. A price like this was already enough to buy several thousand-year heavenly resources already. 1,300,000. An elderly voice called out from the first level. By now, the astronomical price of the geofruit had already scared off many of the bidders, so that only a few remained. 1,350,000. The man next to Jianshun spoke with clenched teeth. It seemed as if this price was already nearing the limit of what he could afford. 1,400,000. The same elder from before immediately called out. With a disappointed sigh, the man muttered to himself, "Forget it, I'll wait for the next auction to buy one." Even though he had given up, there was still regret to be found in his voice. Jianshun had clearly heard what the man had said, and gave him a quick glance, before looking back to the auction once more. 1,700,000. 1,800,000. By now, the price of the geofruit had already skyrocketed to almost 2,000,000 purple coins. While it looked like the only difference between a 1,000-year-old heavenly resource and a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource was age, a 100,000-year-old heavenly resource was able to prolong the life of the one who ate one. With just this one factor alone, a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource was far better than a 1,000-year-old one. Furthermore, 10,000-year-old heavenly resources were extremely hard to obtain. The ones that had managed to survive the harsh winds and stormy rain in nature weren't many, and many heavenly resources in the several thousand-year-old ranges were plucked by the magical beasts or humans already. Thus, raising heavenly resources to an ancient age like that was an extremely hard task. 2,800,000. At last did Jianshun break his silence, to offer a bid of his own that beat the previous bid by a whooping million. He knew that plenty of people were fighting desperately for the geofruit, so in order to deter the others from bidding, he would have to bid an even higher amount. This time, the auction house grew silent. 2,800,000? That was a sky-high price that would wash out the rest of the bidders. Even the middle-aged man right next to Jianshun had stared strangely at him. Chuckling, he spoke. "Brother, you are quite bold if you're willing to spend so much money for the geofruit. I presume you'll be giving it to an elder of yours?" With a silent smile, Jianshun shook his head. Laughing openly, the man replied, "I was mistaken, it seems. Then is it for your own use, brother? A 10,000-year-old heavenly resource gives a considerable amount of power to the eater. A great Saint Master can become an Earth Saint Master guaranteed with the help of one." One doesn't even have to worry about the risk of becoming a cripple during that threshold either. Jian Chen's eyes had lit up straight away when he heard those words from the man. Cupping his hands, he spoke. Brother, is what you just said true? Can a great Saint Master really become an Earth Saint Master with this? Of course. This isn't a secret by any means. Brother, if you don't believe me, then feel free to ask any other man the same question. But because of the immense rarity of a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource, not a single household would be willing to waste such a treasure on a single great Saint Master. The man spoke. 3 million. Just then another offer was given. 3,500,000. Jian Chen did not hesitate to increase the price again. For the sake of his younger cousin, he would take this heavenly resource with all his power. Chapter 602. Fantasy Star Ocean. When the price had gone to 3,500,000 purple coins, even more bidders had gave up on bidding. Even the other bidders who were still bidding had begun to balk about the price and started to have second doubts. 10,000-year-old heavenly resources were rare, but they appeared once every year in Mercenary City. If they didn't get this one this year, there was always next time. 3,600,000. For a while, the auction house was silent before another voice finally called out. 4 million. Jian Chen immediately gave an even higher bid. While it looked as if he was calm inside, his heart was starting to ache somewhat. 4 million purple coins was more than enough to buy 100,000-year-old heavenly resources. Brother, you must be very adamant on taking that geofruit. Haha, I am Hu Xiaotian. What might be your name, brother? The middle-aged man next to Jian Chen asked. Jian Chen turned to look at Hu Xiaotian to study the man. Seeing how earnest and honest the man looked, Jian Chen had decided the man to not be one to act kind in order to gain trust for their own benefit. This one is called Jian Chen. He smiled. Jian Chen, the very same one known as the number one in the gathering of the mercenaries, and known as the king of mercenaries. That same Jian Chen? Hu Xiaotian exclaimed in surprise. I am he. Jian Chen spoke. Hu Xiaotian had been clearly startled by this announcement, but he had quickly regained his wits and cupped his hands in salute. So you were Jian Chen, the king of mercenaries. It is nice to meet you. What pity it was that I was preoccupied when the gathering of mercenaries happened and was unable to watch the battles. Otherwise, I would definitely have watched your match. Afterwards, Jian Chen and Hu Xiaotian had spent the rest of the time chatting and bidding, and in the end, Jian Chen had managed to bid a high price of 4,800,000 purple coins to win the geofruit. Whilst their conversation was going on, the eyes of the entire auction house had turned to look at the corner Jian Chen was in. Each one of them were curious on just which grand family had a son like this. On the third floor of the auction house, a white-robed elder slowly creased his eyebrows as he went into deep thought. Strange, why does the voice of the one bidding for the geofruit sound so familiar? The elder muttered. Then a second later, a brilliant gleam of light flashed across his previously dull eyes as he gave a small shout. Jian Chen. That's Jian Chen's voice. But how? Did he not survive? Now that he had surmised that the bidder had been Jian Chen, the elder got out from his seat and hurried on over to the stairwell. Walking down to the first level, his eyes stared brightly through the dark auction house as he looked for the corner where Jian Chen would be. Upon seeing Jian Chen, the elder began to tremble as a vicious smile seized his face. It's him. It's really him. I didn't think that he had survived, but the seal of Treasure Mountain must still be on him. Feeling the sharp glare of the elder, Jian Chen had instinctively turned to look at the source of the stare. When he saw the elder, Jian Chen had been startled as well, but then a meaningful smile appeared on his face as he stood up from his chair as well and strode over to where the elder was. It was with a swagger to his step that Jian Chen greeted the elder with a smile. If this one's memory is correct, then you must be the third elder of the Shi family. I didn't believe we'd meet each other here. How coincidental. This elder had been an elder of the Shi family with the wind affinity. Back when Jian Chen had been chased to practically the ends of the earth, this feeling of hopelessness caused by the elder had given Jian Chen an unforgettable memory of him. So you really are Jian Chen. With that confirmation, the third elder was now completely convinced that this youth in front of him was the very same Jianshun that had the seal of Treasure Mountain on him. But then now that he knew Jianshun was alive, the man couldn't help but feel excited. Ever since Jianshen's supposed death, they had never once stopped searching for the ruler armament. They had even spent countless of energy in order to use several secret methods to find the location of the ruler armament, but to no avail. And even worse, they had came out for the worse after it. But then out of nowhere, he came across the culprit who had stolen the ruler armament on a random trip to the annual auction house. This accidental meeting had given the elder a rekindled hope and glee. Jianshun, you are a resilient one. Even with such heavy injuries, you're still alive. The elder sneered. Laughing in return, Jianshun replied, perhaps King Yinluo himself was unwilling to give me shelter, so I escaped death. It was a mistake on our ends, I suppose, to not dispose of your body. If we had, you would not be able to live as happily as you do now. Jianshun, I don't wish to mince words with you. Since the Jetta clan isn't here, you may as well come back to my Sure family and return the seal of Treasure Mountain. We will keep silent about your survival if you come with us. The elder spoke. Still smiling, Jianshun stared playfully at the man. Third elder, you should go back. I have yet some things to buy, so I won't have time to accompany you. And with that, Jianshun turned around to return to his seat. Glaring daggers at the back of Jianshun, the third elder clenched his fist tightly in anger. If it were not the fact that they were in Mercenary City, he would have attacked Jianshun a long time ago, without giving him the chance to escape. Jianshun, I'll see to it that you won't escape this time. The man laughed coldly to himself as he left the auction house. He was no longer in the mood to continue with the bidding. Brother Jianshun, I can see that old man was giving you a fishy stare. Was there a problem between the two of you in the past? As soon as Jianshun sat back down, Hu Xiaotian had spoken to him. Not caring to hide the truth, Jianshun nodded. Correct, he is an enemy of mine. Brother Jianshun, you should be careful then. That old man is a Heaven Saint Master. That is an entity that an Earth Saint Master can't hope to contend with. Hu Xiaotian spoke seriously. Thank you for your concerns. This one will be cautious then. Jianshun smiled. Because he had hidden his strength, Hu Xiaotian was unable to see just how strong he was. But brother Jianshun, you shouldn't worry too much. If you ever come across an enemy, then you only just need to run to Mercenary City. Not a single person would dare to act out in Mercenary City. Even Heaven Saint Masters are no exception to this. It's hard to come across a Saint Ruler as an enemy as well, but even they won't cause strife in the city. Hu Xiaotian spoke. Jianshun's heart had skipped a beat when he heard that. Even Saint Rulers wouldn't dare fight? Is Mercenary City truly that terrifying? Far more than you could possibly believe. Hu Xiaotian's face had taken on a serious tone. Holding a hand out to point at the sky, he spoke. Little brother, you've seen the barrier of Mercenary City for yourself, I'm sure. Let me tell you, this barrier has existed for countless of years already, from when Mo Tianyin himself placed the barrier down, protecting Mercenary City through the ages in silence. It has struck down any single person that dared to fight or injure another within its boundaries. The more offensive offenders have been killed. That is how terrifying it is. I see, Jianshun remarked. And so the auction had gone on for another hour, with plenty of strange but rare goods were bought. Some time after, the auctioneer had soon brought out a small glass bottle that was about the size of one's fist. Inside, there was a small and faint glow that seemed to resemble the dazzling light of a star. If one were to look carefully, then they would be able to see that within this bottle, there were a multitude of small particles of sand moving about just slightly. Each particle had let out a light that resembled starlight itself. And from afar, it looked as if the bottle contained the starry skies from up above, each light resembling an individual star from the universe. Holding the bottle up above her head for everyone to see, the auctioneer started. Audience, please allow me to introduce our next treasure to be sold. The item I hold in my hand will most likely be a first for everyone to see here. That is because this item is from one of the death zones of the Tianyuan continent Fantasy Star Ocean. What? Fantasy Star Ocean? I've heard that aside from the Death's Nest, Fantasy Star Ocean is the most terrifying death zone. Even Cross Mountains isn't as terrifying compared to it. A Heaven Saint Master stands no chance there, and even a Saint Ruler would find their deaths at hand there. Who would have known that this would be an object from such a place? It has to be something that some Saint Ruler brought back with him. But what use is there for it? If it's from Fantasy Star Ocean, then there has to be some sort of use for it. Like the rock that would cause 1,000 ripples in a pond, the entire audience had begun to buzz with noise the moment they heard where the item came from. Each one of them were extremely interested in what the auctioneer was holding, and begun to take curiosity in the bottle. Looking seriously at the bottle himself, Jianchen knew that this was the item that the two spirits had told him about. It was one of the extremely high-quality materials, stardust. This is stardust, but it's only a small amount. If we wish to forge the azulate swords, then we'd need at least several kilogram worth of stardust. Ziying spoke with disappointment within Jianchen's mind. But those words had done no small amount of shock to Jianchen, who remarked, "What? Forging the azulate swords would require that much stardust?" "Yes, the more stardust, the better until we hit the limit itself. The amount of stardust here might be small, but it is good to hear that this Fantasy Star Ocean has plenty more of it. Master, you must go to that place and gather even more of it." Ziying spoke. Jianchen couldn't help but feel a grimace overcome his face. He hadn't known how dangerous this Fantasy Star Ocean was before, but just hearing the others talk about it had given him a preliminary idea on the dangers. A Heaven Saint Master was destined to die if they entered, and even a Saint Ruler would most likely fall to their death. That much was enough to tell him that he wouldn't even be able to take a step there. Chapter 603. Followed. The auctioneer's voice continued to speak. "The item I hold in my hand has a very unique name, spiritized dust. Not only is it pretty to look at, but the effects it has will undoubtedly be shocking to anyone that hears it. It contains the energy of the world within the particles of dust, and when worn on the body, then one's cultivation speed will skyrocket. It is by no means inferior to when one uses a monster core to cultivate." There had been a tremendous commotion from the entire audience from such a proclamation. From this, everyone knew just how much the dust was worth. But then the next few words that came out from the auctioneer's mouth had caused everyone to go practically insane. The effects of the spiritized dust isn't limited to just that. As soon as this dust makes contact with the outside world, it will draw in the energy of the world around it in a never-ending stream. If placed around one's home, then that home would become rich with such energy and transform the area into a holy ground for cultivation. Everyone, please take a moment to think about the great benefits of such an item. With this, what worries would your families have? The fires in everyone's eyes had practically ignited to full blaze with that. To them, this spiritized dust had an effect that many times better than what some 10,000-year-old heavenly resource geofruit could do. They could, after all, make their homes into a powerful place of cultivation. Furthermore, this had also opened up the Fantasy Star Ocean as a potential source of revenue. Unfortunately, because of the difficulty of the location itself, obtaining spiritized dust was nearly impossible and put an end to mass exportation of the dust. So in this one moment alone, everyone had made up their minds to get the spiritized dust no matter what the cost. For the sake of the growth of their families, this was a crucial item. Let us start the bid for the spiritized dust at 3 million purple coins. Each bid will increase the price by another 10,000. If anyone has interest in the spiritized dust, then this is an opportunity that cannot be missed. This spiritized dust is an absolute must." The auctioneer smiled. Afterwards, another Herculean battle had taken place, as everyone began to shout their prices one after another. Rising in price at an astronomical rate, the spiritized dust was already well over 10 million purple coins within a few moments. Jianchen had been seated in his corner in silence, without ever making a bid for himself. Since he knew that he now needed a tremendous amount of this stardust, there was no point in fighting for this small amount. It would do him no good to obtain such a minuscule amount for the major price. It would appear that I must go to Fantasy Star Ocean in order to obtain enough stardust in order to smelt the azulite swords. Jianchen thought to himself. For an hour, the stardust had been fought for by the entire audience, before finally being bought out by a mysterious buyer on the second floor for a high price of 80 million purple coins. A sum like that was far more than enough to buy an entire nation. And now that the auction house had finally finished all of its items, the event had ended and Jianchen left the hall. By this time, the outside sky was already growing dark. Hu Xiaotian walked up to Jianchen's side and looked up at the sky with him. Somehow, an entire day has passed without me knowing it. Brother Jianchen, which inn might you be staying at? My inn is the one known as the Sweet Fate Inn on the Westward Street. Sire Hu Xiaotian, it's getting late, so I'll be heading back first to rest. And so, I'll be taking my leave here. Jianchen cupped his hands to bid farewell to him, before turning around to leave. One moment. As things turn out, I haven't an inn to stay in myself. Would it be possible for Brother Jianchen to take me there? Hu Xiaotian laughed as he caught up to Jianchen to walk by his side. Ah, Brother Jianchen, you've gone to the Holy Lands within Mercenary City, I remember. That's a place where even saint rulers dream of going to. Would it perhaps be possible to divulge just what bizarre or fantastic things can be found in there? Hu Xiaotian asked in passing. There are many fantastic things to be found in there, but what truly interests the saint rulers are the saint-tier battle skills. Jianchen had spoken honestly to Hu Xiaotian. Mercenary City was a strong place to be in, and there was no need for him to hide or worry about the secret at all. It was something that he believed all saint rulers already knew, and wasn't a secret at all. As I thought, I figured that there would be one of the saint-tier battle skills they mentioned of in legend. But I didn't expect that these battle skills would be so powerful to destroy even the heavens themselves. Only saint rulers are said to be able to start learning these ones due to the difficulty of comprehension. Each one of those who understands how to use a saint-tier battle skill works, however, are all saint kings without exception. Or so I've heard. Hu Xiaotian remarked. Jianchen had looked strangely at Hu Xiaotian before smiling. It seems Sire Hu Xiaotian is quite knowledgeable about these matters if you know about them to such an extent. But Hu Xiaotian had chuckled in response. It is common knowledge, nothing more. As long as you travel the continent long enough, then things like this slowly come to you. The two had traveled for some time before they finally arrived back at the inn. Jianchen had only just walked into his own room and closed the door behind when he walked on over to the window and opened the boards. Looking outside, Jianchen's eyes slowly traveled to where a giant building was a little away in the distance. On the roof, a single white-robed elder could be seen sitting on it while staring at Jianchen with gleaming eyes. It was the third elder of the Shi family. When he saw the elder, Jianchen couldn't help but feel a small smile crawl onto his face. From the very moment he had left the auction house, the third elder had been stalking him from behind. But this time, the elder had been cautious and stuck close to Jianchen in order to avoid losing him again. Third elder, are you not feeling tired? Jianchen smiled playfully at the elder. With eyes that could leave a smoldering spot, the elder gave a level stare at Jianchen. Jianchen, I advise you to return the ruler armament. You cannot escape this time. Or do you plan to live your entire life within the confines of Mercenary City? Jianchen had said nothing this time, and had instead closed the boards to his windows. Sitting on his bed, Jianchen began to think of the very next step in what to do. Should he kill the elder straight away to head Longevity Valley? Or should he wait for the saint ruler of the Shi family to come so that he could have Elder Xiao in Longevity Valley take care of him? The only vexation that had crossed his mind, however, was the fact that he didn't know just how strong the saint ruler of the Shi family was. He didn't know whether or not Elder Xiao would be able to handle the saint ruler either. After going into consideration for a long period of time, Jianchen had finally reached a verdict on what to do next, before finally settling into a state of meditation to recover his strength. Early next morning, Jianchen had bid farewell to Hu Xiaotian before leaving for the outsides of the city with the sleeping tiger cub. Not too long after he left Mercenary City, Jianchen continued for another 10 kilometers before stopping. Turning to look at the third elder who had been stalking him, Jianshan smiled. Third elder, the barrier to Mercenary City stops here. Did you not wish to steal the ruler armament from me? How do you plan on doing that now? With both arms folded against his chest, the elder spoke. Jianshan, I presume you have called for help of some sort if you can stay so calm. Hurry and call them out. You can't hide anything anymore. If it's you, I have no need to call for anyone else to help me. You worry too much, third elder. I am by myself today. If you wish to take the ruler armament from me, then take it yourself. Jianshan smiled. His presence had already been spread out for 15 kilometers all around the area. If a saint ruler were to appear, Jianshan would run straight for Mercenary City. How arrogant, the third elder spat out. Looking at the open area around him, the man spoke out. Everyone, come out and let us take the 2 ruler armaments from him. The elder had remembered that Jianshan held the Duanyan sword from the Jieto clan as well. With his finishing sentence, 4 70-year-old elders suddenly came out from the skies in each cardinal direction around Jianshan, so as to trap him in. But Jianshan had not been disturbed by their appearances at all. Thanks to his presence, Jianshan had been fully aware of their existences. From the moment he had been in the city to now, there had been no way that someone could hide from him. No matter what they used, they were as visible to him as if it were normal. There had been a faint azure-colored sword in the third elder's hand as he glowered at Jianshan. I'll give you one last chance. Will you or will you not return the ruler armament? At the same time, the other 4 men brandished their own saint weapons. With 5 heaven saint masters against him, Jianshan didn't dare be lazy either, and resolved to use the origin energy of the sword spirits. A beam of azure and violet light immediately shot forth from his right palm, and formed a single blade. The third elder had thought back to the last time he had fought Jianshan to death, when he saw the origin energy. The look on his face solidified as he grew serious. Fourth elder, be careful. Jianshan isn't as simple as he looks on the surface. Third elder, worry not. The 4 of us all know of what happened to the Kai brothers. We won't be following them into the afterlife today. One of the elder laughed confidently. Afterwards, a surge of yellow-brown energy flowed forth from his body, to form a protective layering over him like armor. With this armor for protection, the elder's confidence had been bolstered as well, and immediately flew off towards Jianshan to strike. Chapter 604. The battle outside the city. Jianshan had only laughed. Without fear for his own life, he charged straight for the elder as well. With a thrust of his right arm, the origin energy surging throughout it had arced straight outwards in a brilliant gleam of light straight for the elder's chest. From within his earthen armor, the elder had been startled by Jianshan's course of action. He had no idea that Jianshan would be that fast. Up until now, the few individuals of the Sher family had figured Jianshan to be an Earth Saint Master. It had been outside of their expectations to see that within such a short amount of time, Jianshan would have gone from a second cycle Earth Saint Master to become a Heaven Saint Master. The speed at which Jianshan had struck out with his sword had been far faster than what an Earth Saint Master with a wind attribute would even be capable of. Shocked by this, the elders were now re-evaluating Jianshan to be an even bigger threat. Despite the speed of his stab to be out of their expectations, the elder wearing the earthen armor had been equally fast in his reaction. In a flash, his giant sword had exploded forth with a yellow light that originated from his body. The light on the sword had grown even larger with the amount of energy being fed into it, before it finally smashed against the origin energy Jianshan wielded. Boom! With the collision between Jianshan's origin energy and the elder's saint weapon, a tremendous amount of saint force had been expelled from the area and over the entire earth. With dust pervading the air from the blast, the area between Jianshan and the elder had been completely blocked by the dust, and had made visibility almost impossible. The other 4 elders from the Sher family had used a thin layering of saint force protecting them from the incoming dust, and had stared intently through it with stunned expressions. Third elder, is Jianshan truly a second cycle Earth Saint Master? One elder asked in disbelief. The third elder gave a small hum as he tried to think. 1 year ago when I fought him, he was only an Earth Saint Master. But with just barely a year after that, his strength has basically toppled the heavens to make a tremendous change. What's startling is the fact that he isn't a cripple even after his saint weapon was destroyed. His strength should be extremely low, and not what it is now. Every man is destined for fortune after surviving a great disaster. I suppose that saying is true, because of cases like these. Another elder sighed. Within this moment, a single person came flying straight out from the dust and out towards the third elder. The elder had narrowed his eyes for a moment before letting out a grim sound of laughter. Unharmed? It seems Elder Ma hadn't left even a single scratch on you. Jian Chun, you really did grow even stronger than before. Surrounding his body with the wind element, the elder shot up 50 meters into the sky without a second to spare. Jian Chun's figure had flown straight up into the sky as well. Aided with the wind element from the world, Jian Chun had chased after the third elder without reprieve. What? He's a heaven saint master too. The other 3 elders had been astonished. Not a single one of them had expected or thought to see that someone that was only a second cycle Earth Saint Master would become a Heaven Saint Master that was capable of such a speed that could leave the 3 Heaven Saint Masters tongue-tied in a single year. Seeing Jian Chun fly through the air had caused no small amount of shock to the third elder as well. Stupefied, the elder couldn't help but remark, "But how? Just a year ago, you were merely just an Earth Saint Master before you had your saint weapon destroyed. How did you become a Heaven Saint Master instead of becoming a cripple?" The third elder was no longer as calm as before. His face was filled with abject disbelief, and even in his heart, waves of shock had surged everywhere with great power. Unable to stop himself from sneering after seeing the look on the elder's face, Jian Chun laughed. "Third elder, I should really pay you back for that debt from 1 year ago. Don't even think that you'll leave here alive today." With the final word spoken, Jian Chun had already closed in onto the third elder and brought his origin energy sword straight at the throat of the other man. The third elder was already aware of just how devastating the origin energy was and knew better than to cross swords with it. Borrowing the speed boost his wind affinity gave him, the third elder tried his best to gain some distance away from him. Then, with his saint force pulsating into his sword, the elder shouted out loud, "Earth Tier Battle Skill Cloud Piercer." The wind attribute saint force that had been around the third elder had immediately condensed into a thicker wave of energy that helped propel his body towards Jian Chun with the speed of an arrow shot out from a bow, in an attempt to spear him straight through. Jian Chun had laughed coldly once more when he saw the third elder decide to approach him instead of retreating. With the origin energy, Jian Chun moved to stab the elder when all of a sudden, something behind him had prompted him to turn around and stab at the empty space behind him. Ding! A crisp sound could be heard as from what was once an empty space in the air had now a single figure levitating over it. It was the third elder. The third elder that had been approaching him from the other side had been nothing more than a mirror image that disappeared as soon as Jian Chun looked at it. What a strange battle skill! Jian Chun praised with some astonishment. The cloud piercer that the third elder had used was nothing more than a diversion. The first body had been a mirror image that would move as he pleased, while his actual body used some sort of strange method to hide himself. It had been a silent and strategic course of action that allowed the elder to traverse to behind Jian Chun to attempt at a fatal strike. If not for the presence that Jian Chun had spread out, then the third elder would have most likely delivered a fatal blow onto him. Pfft! A mouthful of blood escaped from the third elder's lips as his face paled due to the blood loss. Glancing at his saint weapon, there was now a new jagged chip to its edge. Elder Hunyuan. Elder Hunyuan is dead. Third elder, Jian Chun has killed Elder Hunyuan. From down below where the dust was finally beginning to recede, the first Heaven Saint Master that had fought with Jian Chun could be seen on the ground. From between his eyebrows, a single hole could be seen leaking blood from the spot. What? Elder Hunyuan is dead? The third elder cried out. Turning to look down, his body grew rigid with shock when he saw the sight for himself. Taking advantage of the elder's period of shock, Jianchen charged forward with the origin energy to pierce through the elder's eyebrows. In the blink of an eye, the distance between the two had closed to less than a meter. Letting out a startled yelp, the elder swung his head as if his life was hanging by a thread. Despite just barely dodging the strike by a hair's breadth, there had been a single gash on his forehead. Whoosh! The second delivery of Jianchen's sword had been just as fast as the first, and followed the elder's movements, without leaving him time to even breathe. The elder had been dreadfully terrified of the origin energy, and wanted nothing more than to distance himself away from it. With no other choice but to rely on his own speed, he retreated backwards to widen the distance. Unfortunately for him, Jianchen had harbored no desire to allow him such a course of action. Encasing himself within the wind from the world, he dashed towards the third elder, in order to pressure him into a situation where he couldn't even retaliate. Assist the third elder. The other three elders had snapped out from their shock, and immediately shot into the skies to help the elder. Don't bother helping me, just use your heaven-tier battle skills. Only those could hurt this bastard. Who would have known that a single year was enough to cause such a drastic change in his power? The elder cried out in anger. His heart had been thrown into disarray with today's events. This was a first in his 300 years of living. A single youth, not even 50 years old, was giving him a thrashing that had not only affected his physical self, but his pride. Without delay, the three Heaven Saint Masters immediately split off into three separate corners and began to charge up their heaven-tier battle skills. The usage of a heaven-tier battle skill by three Heaven Saint Masters was more than enough to cause a tremendous influx of energy to surge around the area. The clouds in the skies above had already started to swirl around the area, and the dirt on the ground was being thrown about due to the fierce wind blowing around. As if an angry dragon was about to awaken, the power that was beginning to unfold here had started to spread out to such distance that even the inhabitants of Mercenary City could feel the change in weather. This is a heaven-tier battle skill. Only those can cause such a tremendous amount of pressure. A Heaven Saint Master must be doing battle somewhere. There's people outside the city fighting. Looks like they're about to use a heaven-tier battle skill. 2 or 3 of them, I'd wager. That's something that's extremely hard to come by. Let's go watch. Mercenary City had instantly gone into a clamor, with many of the people running out of the city to look where the battle was taking place from a distance. From within an inn, Hu Xiaotian had been sitting by himself as he enjoyed a cup of fine liquor and a platter of cooked meat. When he sensed the influx of pressure caused by the heaven-tier battle skill, his eyebrows narrowed together as he thought to himself, there was a Heaven Saint Master following Jianchen yesterday, and today Jianchen had only just left the inn. Could he be the one fighting? Jianchen participated in the gathering of the mercenaries as an Earth Saint Master, but that was barely 4 years ago. Did he perhaps become a Heaven Saint Master within those 4 years? No, that shouldn't be possible, but only a Heaven Saint Master should be possible of using heaven-tier battle skill like this. It has to be someone else that's fighting. I should take a look for myself. Scattering several golden coins onto the table, Hu Xiaotian left the inn as well. From the skies above Mercenary City, the sound of a young woman could suddenly be heard. Big brother? That's Big brother. He's fighting someone. There has to be trouble then. Should Little Spirit help Big brother then? But, Master told Little Spirit to not interfere in things like this. If Little Spirit interferes, wouldn't Master scold Little Spirit when Master gets back? But Big brother has the scent of Master on him. Could Little Spirit really watch Big brother get hurt without doing anything? Aya! What to do? How is Big brother doing? Should Little Spirit save Big brother? Little Spirit's voice grew even more frantic by the second, as if she was unsure of what decision to make. Chapter 605. Enduring 4 heaven-tier battle skills. The sounds that were coming from above the skies of Mercenary City had gone completely unnoticed by the inhabitants of the city down below. With so many people riding on top of a magical beast mount to rush towards the scene of the battle, each one of them were in a hurry to watch the battle, where even a heaven-tier battle skill was being used. The weather of the area was growing even more turbulent by the second, due to the amount of pressure being created by the heaven-tier battle skills. The air in the area felt as if it had solidified. Even Jianshan felt his body grow sluggish because of the 3 battle skills being used, giving the third elder ample time to escape. The elder had let out a sigh in relief. Because of the injuries he sustained while evading Jianshan, along with the constant paranoia of being hit by the origin energy, he had felt like his arms and feet had been shackled. His true strength couldn't be used, and had made him feel rather sullen. Jianshan, let's see you try to be arrogant this time. Heaven-tier battle skill Heaven's Execution Blade. The third elder bellowed before unleashing his battle skill with a vow to injure Jianshan and vent out his earlier frustrations. Deadlocked by 4 different heaven-tier battle skills, Jianshan felt as if he was carrying a gigantic mountain on his back. Movement was extremely difficult for him in this very moment, and did not allow for him to dodge them. Rah! Suddenly, Jianshan let loose a tremendous roar to the heavens that reverberated throughout the entire area. At the same time, 2 fierce glows of azure and violet began to blare up in Jianshan's eyes, as if 2 demonic will-o-wisps were dancing in them. With the squall that was going on, sand and dirt was being kicked around the entire area with pieces of stone and grass to be seen scattered about. In a flash, it had all converged around Jianshan's position. Just 2.5 kilometers away, a strange but attractive force of energy was somehow pulling at the trees in a forest before they too flew towards Jianshan, while basked in an azure and violet light. In no time at all, Jianshan's entire body had been covered by a dense amount of stones and tree. Under his control, 4 separate but gigantic blades made from these fragments were formed within an instant. Each blade had a faint azure and violet glow to it, as it levitated around him. In the same time that Jianshan had finished his movements, the 4 elders had also finished charging up their heaven-tier battle skills. With 3 of the saint weapons shining furiously with an eye-piercing light, the amount of energy flickering off their blades had already started to distort the space around them. Commanding the swords with his mind, he had 3 of them shoot off towards the 3 elders coming at him, so as to abate the strength of the heaven-tier battle skill. Boom! The 3 swords collided with the heaven-tier battle skills while in midair, causing an explosion to occur. The blast had caused the ears of everyone nearby to twinge in pain, while the shockwave continued to flow off into every direction. Even the clouds up above had been scattered apart, while the remaining dregs of energy slammed into the ground and left a crater nearly a meter deep. The 3 swords of Jianshan had been like tofu in the face of the battle skills. Upon collision, they had been shattered apart while the heaven-tier battle skills themselves had remained standing. Continuing onwards to Jianshan with a slightly slower speed than before, it could be seen that the power had been weakened in comparison. A wave of earth had converged around Jianshan's body, before forming an incomparably strong-looking piece of armor. With the azure and violet origin energy swirling around him, the originally 2-finger-breadth wide piece of energy had transformed into a sword about the wide of an entire palm and 10 meters long in length. The iridescent light radiating off of the sword had dyed the area around it a vibrant color as well. In this moment, Jianshan had brought his usage with the azure and violet origin energy to its limits before shooting off 3 separate rays of sword chi to clash with the remaining battle skills. The clash between the 2 had caused yet another explosion with the sword chi being blown apart, while the 3 heaven-tier battle skills weakened once more. With this one additional step, Jianshan had all about run out of enough time to do anything else. The very last thing to do was to allow the 3 battle skills to hit him. Boom! Following the third explosion, Jianshan's body had been sent flying away. Even though the 3 heaven-tier battle skills had been weakened by several levels, its remaining power was still not to be trifled with. Even the armor he wore had been shattered into pieces from the blow. PFTT. A mouthful of dark red blood came escaping out from Jianshan's mouth. His face had already paled by several degrees. If it were against one heaven-tier battle skill, Jianshan could probably escape from one without much harm, if any, but against the simultaneous blows of 3 of them, there was no way he'd be able to do that. Jianshan's body had been catapulted away from the impact of the battle skill. But before his body had even stabilized itself in the air, another wave of pressure had already locked onto his body as the third elder brought both hands over his head. In his hands, a single giant sword about 100 meters in length had materialized with a resplendent beam of light escaping from the blade. Heaven's executing blade, the elder bellowed before swinging his hands down. With that, the 100-meter-long blade came down like lightning onto Jian Chen's head. From where the blade traveled, the space had shuddered slightly, as if it was on the verge of being torn apart. Without any time to even wipe the blood away from his mouth, Jian Chen had commanded the origin energy to shoot forth from his hands with the utmost seriousness. Along with the 10-meter-long blade, the remaining last sword made from stone and tree had shot forth as well to smash against the third elder's heaven-tier battle skill. Boom! The fierce explosion had rocked the entire area, with the explosion sounding more like a crack of thunder impacting against the earth. Everyone had gone deaf for that one moment as the earth beneath them trembled incessantly. Several places on the ground had already started to fracture in a series of spiderweb-like cracks into the surrounding area. The last remaining sword had exploded into a mighty show with barely any tree bark to be seen anymore. It was as if the heaven's executing blade had utterly decimated the tree bark out of existence, while the blade itself continued onwards to Jian Chen. It had been with a grim face that Jian Chen stared at the battle skill. The third elder's usage of the heaven's execution blade had been several times stronger than when the other three Heaven Saint Masters had used it. This was a fact that caused Jian Chen to feel even more somber than before. Up against such a powerful battle skill, his movements were limited once more and meant that there was no room nor time to dodge. His only remaining option was to endure this fourth battle skill. A crazed glare crept into Jian Chen's eyes as he exhausted the very last vestige of his energy into using the origin energy to defend against the mighty heaven's execution blade, while reapplying another layer of his earthen armor onto his body. Although it was powerless to defend him from the heaven skill battle skill, it would still bolster his defenses by a small portion, allowing him to resist even more. The heaven's execution blade had been extremely fast in its travels, and before Jian Chen could get any more than 3 bursts of sword chi out, it had collided onto his body and instantaneously shattered the armor he had been wearing. Suffering yet another heavy wound, Jian Chen's body had been like a bullet as he was blown away, with blood pervading into the air like a bloody mist from his mouth. His chest had been a mangled mess as well. Defending against 4 heaven-tier battle skills was more than what he could take at a comfortable level. He had flown for another 300 meters before finally coming to a rest far away. His face was as white as sheet due to blood loss, but while he was injured, he was not so powerless as to stop himself from falling onto the ground, and had somehow managed to stay afloat in the air. Jian Chen, you're as good as captured. Hand over what we want, or we won't even let you die with your body intact. The third elder gasped out. The heaven-tier battle skill had taken a lot of energy from him, and the heaven's execution blade itself had taken more than half of his saint force. The other 3 elders had convened around the third elder, with gasping breaths as well. Each one of them stared at Jian Chen, as if they were looking at some sort of monstrous person. Not once did they ever imagine that Jian Chen would be able to handle 4 heaven-tier battle skills at once while still being able to stay afloat in the sky. This result wasn't within their expectations. What an unordinary brat he is. I had thought that after sustaining 4 heaven-tier battle skills, he would be crippled if not dead. But even now, he's still alive with manageable wounds. How inconceivable. One of the elders spoke with astonishment. He's deserving to be the king of mercenaries. I see if he can handle even that. The elder to his right sighed in admiration as well. Staring deeply at Jian Chen, the third elder spoke. The power he wields in his hand is extremely strong. With just him alone, the 4 heaven-tier battle skills we used was weakened by him several times over. By the time it hit him, the power wasn't even at half of what it started out to be. Otherwise, there'd be no way he'd handle all that without damage. I wonder just what freakish power it is that he uses. The elder whispered with a small tint of envy in his voice. That's simple. Wait for when we capture him. We'll know all about this strange energy then. The third elder laughed before looking back to Jianshen. Well, do you still think you can face off against us? Remaining silent from his spot in midair, Jianshen tilted his head to look down at his mangled chest. He knew that if not for the fact that he had tempered his body with chaotic force to make it even stronger than before, then the third elder's battle skill would have most likely blown a hole straight through his chest. And if that were to happen, then it would be impossible for Jianshen to survive for the remainder of the battle. With such a grievous wound, then any other Heaven Saint Master would have most likely lose their ability to fight. But even now, he had still a considerable amount of fighting strength. The plethora of strength granted to his body had allowed him to take on this wound with enough energy to spare. Glaring at the four elders in front of him, Jianshen's body slowly began to seep with energy, as if raring to fight. The origin energy in his right hand grew brighter and brighter, allowing the beams of light to take on a more definitive type of form of energy. A year ago, Jianshen had been powerless against the third elder's heaven-tier battle skill. But today, he was completely capable of withstanding four of them. Sensing the intent to battle from Jianshen, the third elder's expression had turned slightly stunned to see that Jianshen was still willing to fight. Jianshen had been able to take on four heaven-tier battle skills and still have energy. This type of capability was something that even a sixth cycle Heaven Saint Master was unable of pulling off. After all, this could kill any Heaven Saint Master. Chapter 606, Imprint of Death 1. By now, a large group of people had already gathered from Mercenary City. From far away, they watched the battle take place between Heaven Saint Masters. Several of the other Heaven Saint Masters had already flown up into the air to watch it from another perspective. Hu Xiaotian had been with the Heaven Saint Masters. Although they were all standing far away, their eyesight was strong enough to allow them to watch the battle with clarity. When he saw Jianshen floating in the air, Hu Xiaotian had been surprised. Isn't that brother Jianshen? So he really did become a Heaven Saint Master. I underestimated him. But isn't he amazing? He's fighting against four other Heaven Saint Masters and managed to withstand four Heaven-tier battle skills. Perhaps brother Jianshen has become a sixth cycle Heaven Saint Master? Look, the one fighting those four Heaven Saint Masters. Isn't that the one who took first place in the gathering of mercenaries, Jianshen? Several figures had realized Jianshen's identity had cried out in shock. It really is Jianshen. But wasn't he an Earth Saint Master when he was in the gathering of the mercenaries? So why is he a Heaven Saint Master now after a single year? Is that really him? Heavens, he's already a Heaven Saint Master. What's more, he's able to fight against four other Heaven Saint Masters using their Heaven-tier battle skills. How inconceivable. Jianshen was in the gathering of the mercenaries, so he can't be over the age of 50. What? 50? Have you seen how old he looks? According to what I know, Jianshen's true age can't be over the age of 30. You're kidding? His age isn't even past the 30s? Good heavens, becoming a Heaven Saint Master at that age is really unbelievable. Those four Heaven Saint Masters used their Heaven-tier battle skills just now, but Jianshen managed to defend himself from them. That's really something else. I'd have to guess he's a fourth cycle Heaven Saint Master at the very least. Why just a fourth cycle? Even a sixth cycle Heaven Saint Master would be hard-pressed to survive four Heaven-tier battle skills. I say that Jianshen has to be a saint ruler. Another elder announced. His expression had been complex as he thought about just how Jianshen had managed to defend against four Heaven-tier battle skill. A feat like that was bordering on the unbelievable. What? Saint ruler? How could that be? Jianshen's identity had been quickly revealed to everyone there. But his revealment as a Heaven Saint Master had been especially shocking. Anyone that looked at him had now a new look of shock as they discussed to one another. When someone had suggested that Jianshen had already become a saint ruler, the entire area had gone deathly silent. Not a single one of them had spoke since news like that was far too incredulous to even imagine. Jian Qin becoming a saint ruler before he even reaches his 30s would be far too terrifying. With the entire continent as a scale, talent like that would be hard to come by every millennia. After a very long time, another elder spoke with a sigh. Jian Qin entered the holy lands of Mercenary City. With his talent already, it would only be a matter of time before he becomes a saint ruler. A frail-looking elder exhaled slowly. On another side, 3 black-robed men stood together as they watched the scene with calm expressions. One of the 3 had a single fan in his hands as he muttered, "A Heaven Saint Master before the age of 30, and can withstand 4 Heaven-tier battle skills. That Jian Qin really is something special. His potential for the future is practically unlimited. If we rope him into our clan before he becomes a saint ruler, it'd be a great boon for us. Elder Zhou, go and make the inquiries on Jian Qin's background later. See just what type of person he is, and where he's from." The middle-aged man standing behind the fan holder had nodded without hesitation. "It'll be difficult, but I will try my best." With his strength revealed, Jian Qin's overwhelming talent had caught the attention of the more influential households. It went without exception that every person was determined to be in his good graces no matter what. If they couldn't, then at the very least they wouldn't be enemies with him. Everyone knew that to offend Jian Qin was tantamount to offending a figure that was close to becoming a saint ruler. This person had a very good chance of becoming a saint king in the future too. Meanwhile, in the skies, Jian Qin was injured, but he was still as imposing as ever. Just like a sword being unsheathed, the power emanating from him was filled with the intent to make battle. The elders of the Shi family had all thought about the result of making an enemy with Jian Qin, but there had already been an unwashable blood debt between the two. The differences between them couldn't be solved amicably, so the only way now was to take advantage of the time before Jian Qin would become an actual threat to the Shi family and kill him first. Like killing the baby in the cradle, they would have to act now, or be forced to witness a disaster to their family when it was too late. Everyone together now. We must make sure to capture Jian Qin today. If we cannot, then we must make sure he dies here instead. We cannot let him escape again this time." The 3rd elder shouted. Without giving Jian Qin any more time to rest, he and the other 3 charged straight at him. Jian Qin was not afraid, even with the situation. Instead of retreating, he dashed forward with the origin energy ready to fight once more. "Brother Jian Qin, I'm here to lend you a hand." Just at that moment, a loud voice exploded forth from the direction of Mercenary City. Seconds after, Hu Xiaotian could be seen flying towards him. "Jian Qin, we are here to help you as well." Not even moments after Hu Xiaotian had spoke, the 3 black-robed men from earlier had flown through the air after him to help Jian Qin as well. The 3 of them wished to be in Jian Qin's good graces, so helping him out in this moment was an extremely rare opportunity that had to be taken advantage of. "You have us as well." Several more voices cried out from the crowd as another 4 Heaven Saint Masters shot forth. Each one bore an intent that was more than willing to fight with the 4 elders of the Shi family. They were all borrowing this opportunity to help create a bridge between them and Jian Qin to gain even more power. After all, helping someone in their time of need was the best way to start a friendship. Within several seconds, 8 different Heaven Saint Masters were flying through the skies to help Jian Qin fight off the 4 elders from the Shi family. This sudden aberration had caused the 4 elders to grow extremely grim. They had never thought that such an event like this would happen. "I appreciate everyone's willingness to lend me a hand, but I alone will be enough to deal with these 4. Everyone, please just stay by the side and continue watching. Today, I will slaughter these 4 myself." Jian Qin spoke to the 8. Only the 4 Heaven-tier battle skills frightened him, but without that, then Jian Qin wouldn't fear these 4 at all. With his origin energy helping him, he had nothing else to worry about. He wasn't willing to be in debt to another person, as well, since he knew that their intentions wouldn't all be as pure as snow. The best option was to just refuse their kindness all in all. Even as he spoke, Jian Qin was already closing in with the 4 elders, and were just several hundred meters away from clashing. When those 8 Heaven Saint Masters heard Jian Qin, they could only just stop their mid-flight. They too wished to see the true strength of someone who had managed to withstand 4 heaven-tier battle skills. Furthermore, they wanted to see just how an injured person like him could kill 4 Heaven Saint Masters. If Brother Jianchen wishes to kill those 4 himself, then I won't stop him in doing so. Wu Xiaotian smiled from his spot. Then if Brother Jianchen needs our help, you all just need to ask, and the 3 of us will do our best to help out. The fan-holding middle-aged man in black robes smiled as well. He had not cared at all for whom the 4 elders Jianchen was fighting. If Sire Jianchen wishes to kill those 4 personally, then we won't interfere with him. But Sire Jianchen, if you truly do need our help, just mention it. The other Heaven Saint Masters repeated one after another politely. If these men dared to stand against the Shi family, that meant that their own statuses were perhaps quite considerable as well. Chapter 607. Imprint of Death 2. Without another word to be said, Jianchen began to do his best to fight the 4 elders. Wielding the origin energy, he chased down the 4 to stab at them with it. The unbelievable speed in which he swung his weapon had been fast enough for several mirror images to be seen. Stroke by stroke, the origin energy struck out accurately and swiftly. In the art of the sword, fast, accurate, and unrelenting were the 3 aspects to master to have a successful mastery over it. While the 4 elders had the advantage in numbers, they were all deeply afraid of the power of the origin energy, and were thus limited in their ability to fight. Since they were handicapped as such, the result was that they were being completely overwhelmed by Jianchen, and had felt sullen about it. Jianchen had his presence to help him serve as a radar in every direction possible. No matter where they tried to turn about around Jianchen, it was completely without success. Each and every time, Jianchen would manage to evade their strikes or sometimes swing his origin energy at their saint weapon instead. As a result, they would have to dodge as well. This bastard is clearly injured, so why can he still fight like this? After several dozen exchanges, one elder had let out an angry curse as he dodged Jianchen's strike. We can't go on like this. The 4 of us will have to use a heaven-tier battle skill together now. Another elder spoke. With one arm tied behind their backs, they could only resort to this. But the 3rd elder had refused. No, a heaven-tier battle skill is far too tiring to use at this moment. A single use of one is enough to take out 50 or 60% of our saint force. If we use it a second time, that'd use up the rest of it, so we'd be powerless to fight. That serves us no use. The 3rd elder had been loath to admit it, but if he had known that Jianchen was this strong, then he would have notified the family to dispatch some people. And if he had sent a message to the Jetta clan, then the 2 households could fight Jianchen together. There would have been no need for his own household to fall into such disrepair and lose a member. Suddenly, a cry could be heard from one of the elders. The reason for this outcry was due to the fact that Jianchen had speared his chest through with the origin energy. Elder Mark, the 3rd elder, and the other 2 had let out a startled cry before they launched an earth-tier battle skill at Jianchen in order to save the elder. But Jianchen's mobility had been even faster than they thought. Just before they could unleash their earth-tier battle skill, Jianchen had already stabbed his origin energy into the forehead of the elder and extinguished his soul. Elder Mark, the 3 cried out in misery. It had been a very painful experience for them to witness the death of Elder Mark in front of them. Jianchen hadn't bothered to stop after killing Elder Mark. His right hand lashed out with 3 separate rays of sword chi to strike at the 3 dazed elders. The death of Elder Mark had weighed heavily on the remaining 3 elders. Only the 3rd elder had been able to regain his wits in time to dodge the sword chi. The other 2 had been too late to react, resulting in the sword chi to pierce straight into their chests. Knowing that this was a chance to kill the other 2, Jianchen immediately rushed forward with the origin energy flashing in his hand. Swiftly, Jianchen moved to slice down their necks. PFT. 2 jettisons of blood could be seen as the decapitated heads of the 2 elders fly through the air. Since their lives had not yet completely ended, looks of complete terror could be seen in their eyes. With a flick of his finger, 2 bursts of sword chi erupted from his hands, and stabbed a hole straight through the middle of their foreheads, extinguishing their soul. In an instant, 3 Heaven Saint Masters had been killed from the 4. Only the 3rd elder was left. At this sight, the 3rd elder had lost all color in his face, as well as all his fighting spirit. Turning around, he began to run away. With the 4 of them, they were already no match for Jianshan. So with just him now, it would only be a matter of time before he too would die. The Jianshan of today was already vastly different to the Jianshan a year ago. He was no longer the same Jianshan that he could chase down to the ends of the earth with. Don't even think about running. Jianshan laughed. With the wind element wrapping around his body, Jianshan flew off into the direction the 3rd elder had been flying to. This speed of his was even faster than the 3rd elder, and halfway through his flight, Jianshan had unleashed a burst of sword chi to chase after the 3rd elder. Whoosh! The sound of the sword chi flying through the air could be heard before stabbing straight through the 3rd elder's chest with lightning-quick speed. A mouthful of blood escaped from the 3rd elder's mouth, causing his face to pale even further. His figure shook slightly as it floated in the sky, as if he was on the verge of losing control. But then, it was with a timely manner that he managed to slow his descent and regain his flight. Seeing that escape was impossible, the 3rd elder had given up on the notion. A resolute look appeared on his face as he turned to stare down Jianshan. Jianshan, even if I die, I won't let you live in peace after. My sure family will never renounce our anger towards you, and you won't live to see yourself outlive it imprint of death. The 3rd elder howled. In the next moment, a faint red mist began to arise from his body, while his body itself began to dry up. Within seconds, it looked as if his body had lost all of the moisture within the body, leaving him as a dried-up husk of a skeleton. This red mist had gathered above the 3rd elder's body, before forming a grotesque bloody pattern. And in the next second, it flew towards Jianshan with unbelievable speed. Jianshan hadn't enough time to dodge the bloody pattern, due to the unbelievable speed of it. It was almost as if it was made of lightning with how fast it had been going. In no time at all, it had embedded itself into Jianshan's body, and then out of sight. Seeing that the blood pattern had laid true to Jianshan's body, the 3rd elder's eyes slowly closed as he fell down to the ground. His body resembled a mummy that had been deprived of moisture for an extremely long time. Paling with fright, Jianshan hadn't even bothered to look at how the 3rd elder had been doing as he hastily checked his own body. From where the blood pattern had touched him, there had been some sort of seal on his body that looked as if he had been branded. Grim! Jianshan thought back to what the 3rd elder said before he died. Imprint of death, he muttered. What kind of black magic is this? The imprint of death is something that makes use of the 3 vital energies of the human body to leave an unwashable mark on their enemy for easy tracking. As soon as Jianshan had finished speaking, Hu Xiaotian's voice could be heard as he flew on over. Staring at Jianshan with a complicated expression, Hu Xiaotian's mind had been far more chaotic than what his expression showed. The fact that Jianshan had killed 4 Heaven Saint Masters was something that he still found hard to believe. Arriving by Jianshan's side, Hu Xiaotian let out a long sigh as if trying to calm himself. Giving himself some time to think first, Hu Xiaotian said, "There is a huge cost for using the imprint of death. It is only when all hope is lost, and death is inevitable that one will use this technique. But once it is used, then the caster will have all of their energy sucked away, and their spirit vanquished. All of the lifeblood in the body will evaporate, and the body will wither away just like that man just now. But the one marked with the imprint of death, wherever he might go, will be easily tracked by it. No matter how far he runs, he will be unable to evade detection." Still staring at Jianshan, Hu Xiaotian spoke. "Brother Jianshan, you must pay attention to this next part. The people behind this elder will definitely use the imprint of death to find you. No matter how far you go, you cannot escape from them. If you can't handle this future, then you should hide in Mercenary City." Jianshan had felt his mind cloud over with those words. According to what Hu Xiaotian was saying, then the saint ruler of the Sure family would be able to find him with ease. There was no use in running to throw him off. Chapter 608. Arrival of Two Saint Rulers. 1. Seeing the miserable expression on Jian Chen's face, Hu Xiaotian could infer that there was most likely no one supporting Jian Chen from behind that could handle the power behind the third elder. As if to console him, he spoke. Brother Jian Chen, don't fret too much. Mercenary City is considered the safest spot on the continent. If you can't deal with those people, then stay within the city. I'm sure these people here will be more than willing to help you out as well. Hu Xiaotian pointed to the Heaven Saint Masters that had been willing to help Jian Chen fight off the 4 Heaven Saint Masters a few moments ago. Ha ha ha, Jian Chen, you are truly powerful beyond imagination. I hadn't expected to see you kill those 4 with nearly a single strike. I can say now that my eyes are fully open to the world now. The man in black robe spoke. Holding his fan, the man laughed out loud as he spoke. But his words had been indeed spoken from the heart. They were all truly stunned by just how strong Jian Chen was. Sire Jian Chen, the imprint of death on you is something that the men behind the third elder could use to find your position rapidly. If Sire Jian Chen can't fight them off, then my Vulcan Shrine would be more than happy to help you. Don't worry about the Sure family. Our Vulcan Shrine have no fear for them. A red-robed elder smiled amicably to try and gain Jian Chen's favor. You have my Daong clan. If Sire Jian Chen requires it, then my clan would be more than happy to help you deal with the Sure family. The black-robed man had been unwilling to give up their chance to earn Jian Chen's favor as well. Wiping away the blood from the corners of his mouth, Jian Chen cupped his hands to everyone. I am thankful for everyone's willingness to assist me, but I will deal with this matter myself. I won't be imposing my troubles on you all. There was no such thing as a free meal in this world. And Jian Chen knew just what had prompted these people to be willing to help him. He would not let himself owe another a favor so easily. Well then, there isn't much use in chatting for now. Brother Jian Chen is injured something fierce. We should treat his wounds back in Mercenary City first. Hu Xiaotian spoke up. Taking a pure white pill out from his space ring, he handed it over to Jian Chen. Brother Jian Chen, this is a Class 6 Radiant Spirit pill. It won't be enough to heal your wounds, but it should speed it up a bit. Take a bite. Looking at the thumb-sized pill in Hu Xiaotian's hand, Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before finally taking it from him. With a word of thanks, he swallowed the pill. Jian Chen had a rather favorable impression of Hu Xiaotian and wouldn't refuse the pill offered to him. That would be impolite to Hu Xiaotian. After taking the pill, Jian Chen had felt his wounds healing faster than before. Even his pale face was beginning to regain some of its red flush from before. Afterwards, before the other people around Jian Chen left, Jian Chen was able to take the space rings from the corpses of the elders he had just killed. Together, they returned to Mercenary City, leaving behind a stunned audience, still standing far off to the side to stare at the wreckage of the battle. This time, Jian Chen's true strength had astounded every single person in attendance. It had been far beyond their imagination even. Soon, his name would spread rapidly throughout the entire continent with tremendous speed. A man who had reached the Heaven Saint Master realm before the age of 30. Furthermore, this same person was able to survive against not 1 Heaven tier battle skill, but 4. Even combined, those elders had been no match for Jian Chen. This was a gargantuous piece of information that would spread across the continent with great fervor. Big brother, you're hurt. Are you okay? The very moment Jian Chen stepped across the barrier of Mercenary City, the clear sounds of a young woman could be heard echoing in his ear. Jian Chen's figure shook slightly as he looked around the place. But Little Spirit couldn't be seen. Big brother, Little Spirit is right here. Following the voice, the young figure of a woman suddenly materialized in front of Jian Chen. It was the very same Little Spirit that had appeared in his room the night before. But this time, her body was slightly transparent. One would be able to see straight through her body. Big brother, it's good that you were able to beat those idiots. Otherwise, Little Spirit would have gone against Master's orders to not interfere with the world. Big brother, does your wounds hurt? Little Spirit asked in concern from her perch a meter high in the sky. There had been a pained look on her face, as if she was looking at a hurt family member of hers. The fact that this Little Spirit a being that had only just been crying over the loss of her long-lost master yesterday, was so pained at his current situation. Jianchen couldn't help but feel slightly emotional as well. He had taken a liking to Little Spirit, and his feelings of her felt like a fellow orphan that was all alone in the world. Stopping in his footsteps, Jianchen smiled towards Little Spirit. "I'm fine. It was only a relatively minor injury. It won't take long before I heal up completely." "Yeah, big brother, you have to make sure to heal up. Little Spirit feels really bad to see you like this." She spoke in concern. Seeing the expression on her face, Jianchen couldn't help but smile inwardly to himself. "Hey brother Jianchen, who are you talking to? Talking to yourself like that? Are you sure you're fine?" Wu Xiaotian spoke from beside Jianchen. He had been waving his palm in front of Jianchen's face with an odd look. Jianchen had stared blankly back at him as he turned away from Little Spirit. Looking at Wu Xiaotian and the other men, he could see that each one of them were looking at him rather strangely. "I was talking with Little Spirit, can you not see her?" Jianchen asked curiously. Looking around the area, Wu Xiaotian answered. "Brother Jianchen, have you gone blind perhaps? There's no such Little Spirit anywhere. I can only see you standing off to yourself, and speaking to no one but yourself. No matter where I look, I can't see anyone else. Big brother, Little Spirit doesn't wish to let them see Little Spirit, only you can." Little Spirit had spoken in the midst of his confusion. Hearing her explanation, Jianchen had realized what was happening and smiled towards everyone. Continuing to walk with everyone else, Jianchen smiled awkwardly, while trying his best to not talk to himself any longer. Looking for an inn to rest up in for the night, Jianchen holed himself up for the night while Wu Xiaotian and the other two groups returned to their own rooms. Shutting the door to his room, Jianchen tore off the clothes he had been wearing with a pained grunt. Using a clean towel to wipe off the dried-up blood on his chest, the wounds on his chest could now be clearly seen. In some parts of his chest, parts of his bones could be seen almost. How fortunate that my body was tempered by the chaotic force to become far stronger than before. If not, then I would have most likely not the strength to stand out anymore after that. Jianchen muttered. Placing down the tiger cub, he allowed for it to continue sleeping in peace on the bed. Since the cub was sleeping off the heavenly resources it ate, the cub was completely unaware of the outside world. So when Jianchen had been fighting those four elders, it hadn't been shaken awake and continued to sleep. Jianchen himself had no solution on how to change that either. Doing a simple treatment of his wounds, Jianchen took out 2 radiant spirit pills from his space ring and swallowed it down. There were plenty of experts in major families within Mercenary City, so he didn't dare use his radiant saint force to heal himself. Furthermore, he was resolved that until he was a saint ruler, Jianchen wouldn't disclose the fact that he was a radiant saint master. Just as Jianchen closed his eyes to focus on healing, Little Spirit suddenly materialized within the middle of the room. When she saw the horrifying wound on Jianchen's chest, Little Spirit had a pained look in her eyes. Reaching out with a finger, a small burst of energy emanated from her before entering into Jianchen's body. Following the energy entering Jianchen's body, the wounds began to heal at an extremely accelerated pace. The speed at which the wounds were healing were far faster than if he were to use his radiant saint force to heal. Sensing the drastic change within his body, Jianchen's heart had skipped a beat. Opening his eyes, he realized that Little Spirit had been in the room with him. From her appearance, he could infer just what had just happened. Big brother. Seeing Jianchen open his eyes, Little Spirit had revealed a sweet and affectionate smile. Little Spirit, thank you for your assistance. Jianchen thanked her. He, as long as Big Brother is fine, then Little Spirit will be happy to help. She giggled. With her assistance, Jianchen hadn't needed to do a thing. His own body had been recovering at a terrifyingly rapid rate. What would had needed 2 or 3 full days to heal was taking only a single scant minutes before it had fully recovered, allowing Jianchen to be shocked beyond belief. Big brother, Little Spirit wants to ask a question. Big brother better not lie to Little Spirit. She stared carefully at him with apprehension. Little Spirit, what question is it? As long as I know, I'll be sure to help you. Jianchen asked. Hesitating for a brief moment, she looked hopefully at Jianchen. Big brother, have you really not seen Master before? There had been no hesitation when Jianchen shook his head. Little spirit, I won't lie to you. I have never seen your master before. He sighed regretfully. Little spirit had turned melancholic as she listened to Jianchen's denial and drooped her head down. She was more than aware that her master had been gone for plenty of years, but she was desperate to see her master once more since he was like a parent to her. He was an important figure that she longed to see. Big brother, little spirit will be leaving first then. She spoke as her body began to fade away from the room. Looking to where little spirit had previously been in, Jianchen let out another long sigh, before washing away the rest of the blood trails on him. Changing into a new set of clothes, he sat on his bed and began to think about the imprint of death the third elder had placed onto him. The imprint of death looked like a very complicated pattern formed from a series of abstruse runes that imprinted itself on his body, as if it were branded deep into his skin. But there had been nothing out of the ordinary that Jianchen could sense from it. But the fact that he had it had made Jianchen feel worried. Although he had killed the third elder, this blood debt did not leave any feeling of happiness in him. Since the imprint of death was on him, Jianchen had no other choice but to give up on going to Longevity Valley and stay within the confines of Mercenary City in order to evade on being killed by the Saint Ruler of the Sure family. While Elder Xiao in Longevity Valley was a Saint Ruler himself, Jianchen had no idea just how strong he was. In the case that Elder Xiao stood no chance against him, then Jianchen would have only allowed for harm to befall the entire Longevity Valley. Furthermore, there was no guarantee that Elder Xiao would even help Jianchen fight the other Saint Ruler. Becoming the enemy to one Saint Ruler was after all something that would require a far closer relationship with Elder Xiao before Jianchen could even suggest it. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.